Word 2. Then Word 3.
Yes.
Word 4. Word 5. Word 6. Word 7 is here. Word 8.
Present.
I think Victor might need to mute.
Does someone have their computer on Zoom in the room? Oh, okay. I got it.
Mary Lorraine.
Present.
Right. So we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Our 5th grader leading us tonight is Taka Uchida Wood. Come on up from Countryside. Taka's teachers say this about him. Taka is a kind and hardworking 5th grader at Countryside. He is a friend to all and consistently models our school values through his words and actions each day. His positive attitude and strong character make him a valued member of the Countryside community. So if you would like to participate, no obligation, but please rise and begin whenever you're ready.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Want to share anything about your school or yourself?
So for a hobby, I like to play volleyball and I play for a team. And I love my school because it has a variety of different people. And all those people are really nice and kind to me. And yeah.
That's great.
Great
Thank you.
job.
Okay. So we will now do public comment. This is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. You'll get a warning from Jason at the 2.5-minute mark. The committee will not respond directly during the meeting, but will consider your feedback. Remote speakers, please ensure that your Zoom name matches the name that you use to request to speak and unmute when your name is called. In-person speakers, I'll call names and you may come up right to the microphone and make sure you pull it nice and close before you begin and speak right into it. You can begin by stating your name and address. So let's start with some in-person. Sahar Zahir. And after that, Enrique Rosero.
Don't start timing.
Don't worry.
Good evening. My name is Sahar Zahir, and I am a Newton CPAC board member, and I live at 242 Islington Road. I am first going to read a statement on behalf of an NPS parent who has had a child in the Bridge program. In Dr. Nolan's proposed budget framework, there is a proposal for providing an additional special education staff member for the Bridge program at the middle school level. The Bridge program at the elementary level is a very robust program and has had extraordinary success in supporting students with extensive social and emotional needs. This is vastly more prevalent since COVID. My child started with the Bridge program from its inception and found great success. However, when it came time to transition to the middle school level, we found that the scaffolding and available staffing was not sufficient to meet their needs. As a result, they were subsequently referred for out-of-district placement. Had appropriate staffing been available at the middle school level, this would have saved significant long-term funding, both for in- out-of-district contracts and transportation. It also would have kept my child closer to their local peer group and less socially isolated. I feel an often overlooked point is how having special education staff in the building is beneficial to general education students too. Staff members do not silo themselves into assisting solely students with IEPs. They could frequently jump in when necessary to support any student that needs additional help. It also ensures that programs have more ready capacity when new students are identified for appropriate placement into citywide programs. This early intervention can often result in shortened times needed to return to grade level work or to develop age-appropriate social and emotional responses. Bridge was a life-changing program for my child and for many others. As the first cohorts of students in the program advanced to middle school, we not only owe it to them to continue the same robust programming, we owe it to the district to avoid additional costs from out-of-district placement. And we owe it to the community as a whole to have access available to these resources when needed. Now, as a Newton CPAC board member, I provide this individual comment. Many families in special education want their children to remain in district. I will repeat this again. We want our children to remain in district. While out-of-district placement may be necessary in complex cases, they come with real challenges. long wait lists, greater distances, and hours of daily transportation
30
that take
seconds.
time away from families and extracurriculars. Investing in additional staffing for Bridge and Reflections programs allows more students to stay in district, maintain community connections, and better prepare for life after high school. While these investments may seem costly in the short term, they often prevent significantly higher out-of-district costs for years ahead. I urge the committee to consider not just immediate needs, but the long-term trajectory of our special education students. Thank you.
Amazing timing. Enrique Rosero, followed by Lindsay Golden.
Dr. Enrique Rosero, 19 Garland. The allocation is the allocation. I've heard that at least twice at every budget presentation, repeated with the arrogance of determinism. So what's the point of holding hearings or even having this committee discuss the needs of our district if the amount was set long ago at the mayor's office even before the case was made? And even next year, the mayor has already indicated what the allocation will be for the next couple of years. We're going back to the days when Flashman backed into the number given without any advocacy for what NPSs needed. This committee is ready to accept $3 million less than what is required for level service and not even fund your own champion priorities. It's totally expected from the slate handpicked by Mr. Laredo to carry his will. For all your talk about your prowess as managers and billion-dollar deal executives, not a single viable financial solution has emerged in these sessions. Just NPS one-on-one questions and a few creative ideas, like what was it? Eliminate bus service for middle and high school students, or mandate a $100 contribution from families for the OOPS fund. Very little to no advocacy for the critical needs of our students. Mr. Laredo repeatedly asked for personnel, aides in particular, and recommended that the district redeploy staffs as he does in City Hall, as if firefighters drive snowplows and planners pick up policing when short-staffed. Thus, NPS should be able to figure out the math specialist issue as well, right? Mr. Laredo also said, quote, "We do not need to see the laundry list of things we are not going to fund." I disagree. Our community needs to see exactly how you are compromising the education of our children and how you are choosing not to support the strategic plan, not even the deployment of the new math curriculum. Being poor is expensive. Not investing in maintenance, support staff, interventions, etc., escalates into larger, costly, and more complex issues. So here we are again, robbing Peter to pay Paul, doing less with less. Things cannot be cheap, good, and fast all at once. It seems you shall choose how to break this austerity cycle. Are you going to challenge the mayor and Mr. Hills and tell them there isn't any more room for cuts? Are you going to question the sacred cows, the neighborhood school model, the arbitrary class sizes, the demands for IEPs? Are you going to organize for an override? Or are you simply going to fold and call your $3 million cuts a success on the path to restoring excellence? Thank you.
Lindsay Golden, followed by Marie Andraves.
Lindsay Golden, also 19 Garland Road. I have one request. It seems, having watched a bunch of school committee meetings, that you guys are getting ready to accept the allocation that will require a failure to meet level services plus. One of the chief critiques of the group, the Laredo slate, was that by accepting Mr. Laredo's vociferous endorsement and by accepting his campaign funds, his generous campaign contributions, that you would not be able to stand up to Mr. Laredo when he was not giving Newton Public Schools exactly what it needs. I subscribed to that, and I'm hoping that you will prove me wrong. Just because Mr. Laredo says the allocation is the allocation does not mean you cannot do what is right and stand up for what your superintendent is telling you she needs. The community is depending on you to do what you said you would do, which was be independent advocates for the schools. Mr. Laredo is one member of the school committee. All of you have the responsibility to stand up to him. I would love to see you stand up to him and push back against the budget, but at bare minimum, please explain to the community what is going on, advocate to the community, get into the community, and show that what Mr. Laredo is providing is insufficient to deliver students what they need in a budget that is already cut to the bone. Thank you.
Marie Andrawas, and then Brittany Brierley.
All right. Hi, my name is Maria Andrawas, 142 Lowell Avenue, and I'm providing comment today in support of the middle school bridge program, which serves children with significant social, emotional, and behavioral needs. My son was initially referred to the elementary bridge program while he was in 4th grade. His team determined that even with significant IEP support, including a one-to-one aid, he needed a more specialized therapeutic program to be able to safely remain in MPS. This required transferring him from Burr to Pierce, which is a very difficult transition for him. But with this additional support, he successfully completed elementary school and ultimately was referred to the bridge program at Day, where he's currently in 6th grade. His initial transition to middle school was rocky, as I'm sure it is for even the most well-adjusted neurotypical children, but even more so for those who struggle with emotional regulation, which can manifest in both internalizing and externalizing behaviors that significantly disrupt learning. 2 months into the school year, we were concerned that even the bridge program might not be able to sufficiently support him, and we would end up needing to go out of district. But it's a true credit to the efforts of their staff who continue to work with him to refine his behavior support plan, to collaborate with us, consult with his outside providers, and he's made remarkable progress since October. At the beginning of the year, he was in 2 inclusion classes and in bridge small group classes for the remainder of his schedule. And as of March, he's now fully in inclusion classes and in bridge only for academic support and counseling. And he's actually on track to transition out to team-based support for 7th grade. This would not have been possible without the bridge staff who go above and beyond to help these students, but are frequently stretched thin by the demands of their complex emotional and behavioral needs, while simultaneously having to meet their very diverse academic needs. And I can personally attest to the fact that inadequate staffing with this specific student population poses a very real safety risk to both staff and students. I did get my son's approval before volunteering to speak here today, as I didn't want to share anything that he felt was too sensitive or private. This segment of special education, unfortunately, carries with it considerable stigma, as difficulties with emotional and behavioral regulation are often viewed as disciplinary problems or parenting failures rather than manifestations of legitimate disabilities. But he said he wanted me to share my thoughts, that we needed to advocate for the program. And he actually asked if he could provide his own for me to share as well. So
You have 30 seconds.
In his words, I think that the bridge program, both at Day and Pierce, has been really beneficial for me and my family. They have supported me through some tough moments, and they have also really guided me during a very generally tough period of my life. However, at the Day Bridge program, I've noticed that at times there was not enough staff for all the kids in classes. Sometimes my one-to-one aide and I must leave my class and come down to Bridge because they need help covering for other teachers. Sometimes they even pull in general special ed teachers to work with us because they don't have enough staff. I think not only would an extra staff member make things easier for the teachers, it would make things better for us students. Thank you.
Brittany Brierley, followed by Hallie Armstrong.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brittany Brierley. I live at 35 Andrew Street in Bellingham, Mass. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to express my concerns about the budget as things currently stand. I teach 8th grade math at Day Middle School. This is my 11th year in this position, and as I said in my previous public comment right before the strike, I love my job. I feel lucky to work with educators who are passionate about what they do and leadership who truly supports us. And of course, we have the most amazing kids. I could go on for hours about the needs at the middle level. Post-pandemic teaching is not for the faint of heart. Students' academic, behavioral, and social emotional needs are drastically different from when I started teaching here in 2015, when I had class sizes of 18. Next year, as it currently stands with the budget, we will have 25 plus students per class in 8th grade. more needs and way less of me to go around. Since I only have 3 minutes and not hours of your time, I'm going to focus my comments tonight on my concerns about moving forward with the math pathways without having the proper supports in place. Since this is my 11th year in the district, I've experienced teaching leveled math as it previously existed in grade 8. I was part of the de-leveling movement and honestly think that mixed level classes in middle school are what is best for the vast majority of students. With teacher training and proper differentiation, heterogeneous middle school math classes can be rigorous for those who are ready for more and supportive for those who aren't quite there yet. I will say I'm disappointed that we're re-leveling in 8th grade, but since it's the directive of the district and what we've heard from many parents and what they want, I'll of course do my part to make the transition a successful one. However, after hearing about the shortfalls in the budget allocation, I'm scared to move forward with this initiative. I don't worry for myself as a teacher. I've taught leveled math before, but I'm scared for the 28% of students at Day Middle School who are currently below grade level in math. We're proposing that we condense 6th and 7th grade curriculum in order to give all students in grade 8 access to a full high school level course by 2028. I am all for high expectations for students. In fact, I think having these expectations are what make me an effective teacher. What terrifies me is the possibility of raising the bar so high for a whole group of students who are below grade level without giving them the support they need to reach that bar. We have not had math specialists consistently at the middle school level since I started in 2015. We are currently teaching the appropriate grade level standards in math, and we still have 28% of students not mastering grade level content and have no additional support. What will happen when we squish 3 years of math into 2 years and then, honestly, crush some students' self-esteem when they don't make it into the accelerated math cohort? If you heard me talk at the 7th grade math meeting, you heard my feelings about next year's accelerated math class for 8th graders. It's basically a separate class for students who have the financial means to take outside math class. These math specialist positions are absolutely crucial for this programmatic shift to be successful. Otherwise, all we will succeed in doing is widening the achievement gap. I implore you, for the kids who need it most, to please fully fund the level service budget. And if the plan is to move forward with math pathways, the math specialist roles at the middle level are absolutely crucial. Thank you.
Ali Armstrong, followed by Christian Jonesh. And then we'll go to remote speakers.
All right. Hello. If it isn't an FA Day party in here tonight. All right. Because it's the best. So I'm Hallie Armstrong. I am an 8th grade English and civics teacher. We love civic action at FA Day Middle School in my 9th year of teaching. And I'm here, similar to those before me, to talk about the budget. Feels a little bit deja vu since, like Ms. Brierly, I was also here in 2023, just before the strike, to advocate around needs related to classroom size and budget support. So Mayor Laredo, this one's for you, because during your campaign, my 8th grade class was following it, of course, one of our big units, and many were really excited about your stance on public education. I pulled this actually directly from their notes. I did also verify it from your campaign website. As the former chair of the school committee, I understand that providing an exceptional education requires investing in our schools. As mayor, I will work to provide teachers and staff with the tools they need to continue to advocate for the necessary investments in our facilities. I also, as an English teacher, we really believe in text evidence. So specifically, your emphasis on investment was heartening. It led me to believe that hopefully this will be a departure from Mayor Fuller's frank reluctance to fund the schools the way Dr. Nolan has asked. We have an exceptional superintendent with a lot of knowledge, and I appreciate that you are advocating for an increase. However, our schools require more than what you're offering. This request is not for lack of effort on our part or out of greed. It is out of need. I don't do anything less than 110%. Dr. Nolan is asking for resources that we've been asking for and denied for years. Take literacy specialists, for example. I have not been able to recommend a child for literacy support or writing help since 2019 in 8th grade. Those supports were cut and never since returned. As a result, parents request more special education testing, so our numbers go up, as does the money required to finance that. I make it work as best I can. I really use every tool in my wheelhouse, and there's still a subset of kids that are not getting what they need. As a fellow runner as well, for Needham, sorry. I'm used to tough moments. I'm used to pushing through challenging peaks and valleys, but it's been some pretty lean years with not enough resources. So we work well at day. We've made a lot of growth for especially some of our vulnerable populations. However, it's kind of in spite of what we've been given, and we need more. So before my time is up, I will make one request of you, Mayor Laredo, and school committee. I have a standing open invitation. You are welcome in my classroom any day at any time. The hallways of Dale Middle School can be a bit of a wild ride. So I would ask that you spend a full day at FA Day and not a 15-minute classroom walkthrough, and see for yourself what we are asking for in support of our reflections and bridge programs that service some of our most vulnerable students in a way that is just incredible. The work they do is so impressive. If you had the chance to spend time with even our general ed, our special ed kids who aren't in those programs the way I do every day, you would see they are worth a full investment. They are worth every penny, not a partial investment.
Your time is up.
So there we go. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anytime, guys.
All right, so we have remote speakers. We'll start with Lindsay Klump, followed by Marie. Oh no, Marie spoke in the room, so no Marie. Diana Bellman will be after Lindsay Klump. So Lindsay, if you can unmute.
Lindsay Klump, 61 Gatehouse Road. I'm a board member of the Newton Special Education Parent Advisory Council, or CPAC. Tonight, I speak on behalf of our board and in consideration of NPS's students with disabilities who have continued to represent over 18% of total enrollment across the last 5 years. By law, the CPAC advises decision makers on special education issues. For many years, CPAC has spoken here against budget cuts impacting our students, and we've advocated for Newton to be an authentically inclusive district that fulfills IEP mandates meaningfully. Over the last 5 years, special ed has felt budget reductions due to insufficient city funding, and those continue to have lasting effects upon our students. Tonight, we advise again that it is in the best interest of our special ed students for NPS to be fully funded in support of Superintendent Nolan's strategic priorities. Mayor Laredo, your decision to increase the base allocation to NPS shows your commitment to our students and teachers and your faith in district leadership. We now ask you to consider the yet unmet needs of our students with disabilities. Specifically, the CPAC supports NPS's requests for funding of the following: 2 special ed full-time staff needed to educate students with significant mental and physical health needs in the Bridge and Reflections program at Brown and Day. 2 special ed teachers at the high school level. Salary costs for aid support that is required by law for students with that IEP-based need. 8 additional team specialists at secondary level, as right now only elementary has these positions. 1 district-wide psychologist to handle many private school evaluations. 1 full-time staff to support medically complex students and to expand REACH program capacity. A special ed staff caseload and workload review. Rising out-of-district placement tuition costs for students who cannot be educated within NPS. Safe and appropriate transportation for students with disabilities, which when written into an IEP is a requirement and a student's basic right. I want to be clear, these elements of the budget are foundational for students with disabilities to simply access their education, not necessarily to thrive. The risks of not funding the items we have listed include unsustainable increases in caseloads for special ed staff, burnout, turnover, and challenges filling special ed positions, litigation in cases where IEPs are not met, a potential increase in out-of-district placements, and most concerning above all, students with disabilities who suffer without adequate mandated supports. Thank you for supporting our students with disabilities.
Thank you. Diana Bellman is next, and then Ema Johnstotter.
Hello.
Hi, we can see you.
Hi. Hi, good evening, Superintendent Nolan, Mayor Laredo, members of the school committee. My name is Diana Bellman. I'm a parent of a 2nd grader, rising 3rd grader at Ward School. I'm here to ask you for additional third grade classroom at Ward Elementary for the next school year and to address a clear equity issue in the current budget. The proposed budget places 48 students into 2 classrooms of about 685 square feet each. That's 24 students per room, roughly 28 square feet per child, already below the national best practice standard of 35 square feet. But that number gets worse. These rooms routinely operate with 2 or 3 adults present throughout the day. Factor in adult workspace, and usable space per student drops to somewhere between 11 and 17 square feet. That is far below any recognized standard for a safe, functional learning environment. The impact is real and visible every day. Classrooms are crowded and noisy, making it harder for students to focus. Illness spreads faster. We saw a significant increase in flu-related illnesses this winter. Students bump into each other, increasing the risk of injury. Students with IEPs can be served with the least restrictive environment because there's simply no room. And there's no space for small group or MTSS work without pulling kids out of class, losing time on learning. Now, here's the equity issue. The current budget proposes class-side relief for Angie and Zervis, brand new schools with 900 plus square foot classrooms. Ward's projected class size of 24 already exceeds a district average of 18.8. We're being asked to accept the largest classes in the smallest, oldest rooms in the district. Prioritizing newer, better resource schools over Ward creates a real and meaningful inequity. To make it worse, Ward's building conditions, older infrastructure, poor lighting, and acoustics only make the overcrowding more harmful to students' health and learning. Adding a third section would bring class sizes in line with district norms, restore workable space for students and staff, and meet the district's basic obligation to provide equitable conditions across all schools. I urge you to address this now before the budget is finalized. Ward students deserve the same standards as students anywhere else in Newton. Thank you so much for your attention and your action.
Thank you. Ema. There she is.
Hi, my name is Ema Johnstutter. I live on 156 Warren Street in Newton. I am the mother of a 17-year-old junior at South, and I co-chair the Newton Commission on Disability. Tonight, I will be speaking for myself. Children with disabilities face a variety of challenges on a daily basis that are related to their disability itself. But often, the challenges that hurt the most are normalized ableist social norms. Most often because peers don't know any better, have never been educated about disabilities, and therefore don't have the language to talk about disabilities. We, the parents of neurodivergent and disabled children, often feel helpless against these attitudes because we know how deep and far back they go. As a mother of a 17-year-old with a physical disability, I can say that while many of his medical challenges are really hard and stressful, we at least know that we usually have concrete tools to deal with them. But changing ableist attitudes is completely different. We can only do that together as a society with education, will, and understanding. Over 40 years ago, a few Newton parents decided to do something about this problem and created Understanding Our Differences, an educational program for children with disability awareness. When UOD was let go from NPS 3 years ago, this very public comment section was filled with testimonies from families whose children had benefited from having UOD visit their schools. I'm here today to remind you that we were promised a replacement for UOD and that it is time to get serious about fully implementing the new anti-ableism curriculum at all our elementary schools. Many of us moved to Newton specifically because of its reputation for being inclusive and having good services for students with disabilities. But Newton is now experiencing a big gap in disability awareness education because the new anti-ableism curriculum is simply not being given priority. We are receiving conflicting information about where the curriculum is at, what the timeline for rollout is, if and when teachers got training, and what disability representation looks like for our children. We have learned that UOD can be brought into school assemblies to bring in speakers with disabilities, but this is completely at the discretion of each school's PTO, and only one school has taken advantage of it this year. Our disabled and neurodivergent children deserve and need for us to get serious and do better. Newton should show that it can continue to be a leader in inclusive and disciplinary affirming practices and attitudes. So I ask you to please help us advocate for detailed clarity on the rollout of the anti-ableism curriculum and to budget for and bring the complete new curriculum to our elementary schools as soon as possible. What dollar amount is needed for this to happen? Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment and the public hearing. So we will adjourn this one and begin a regular school committee meeting right now. Yeah. She's with it. So we're calling to order the March 18th, 2026 meeting of the Newton School Committee. We'll begin with public comment because we did our pledge with the public hearing. So I will repeat the public comment rules just because let's just learn them. Let's really internalize these bad boys. It's time reserved for members of the public to address the committee and for committee members to hear directly from you. We will not respond during the meeting, but we will listen and consider your feedback. You may also reach out directly to school committee members at any time to discuss feedback, and our contact information is on the website. Remote speakers, please ensure that your Zoom name matches the name that you use to request to speak, and unmute when your name is called. In-person speakers, I'll call names and you may come up and speak directly into the microphone. You will have 3 minutes to share concerns with the committee, and then you will get a 30-second warning from Jason at the 2.5-minute mark. Please start by stating your name and address. We will start, I think we have a trio speaking. Karen Carol Bennett, Teresa Fitzgerald, and Karen Manning from the Newton Schools Foundation. Fitzpatrick, I'm sorry. It does say Fitzgerald, actually.
Good evening. My name's Karen Carol Bennett. I'm at 42 Milo Street. We are the members of the executive team of Newton Schools Foundation. Would like to read a letter we sent last week to the school committee so it can be part of the public record. Dear school committee members, we're writing to correct the record with regard to your discussion about the calculus project. And during last week's school committee meeting held on March 9th. The Newton Schools Foundation remains strongly committed to ensuring the success of the calculus project. We have funds earmarked to support TCP and intend to continue our $55,000 allocation as long as we are able to do so. Likewise, our donors have demonstrated their strong faithfulness to the calculus project through multi-year commitments. The program's success is evident in the achievements of its graduates, many of whom return year after year to mentor and support the next generation of students. Our longstanding hope has been that the Newton Public Schools would eventually absorb the full cost of TCP, given the district's stated commitment to equity and expanding opportunities for all students. In the meantime, the Newton Schools Foundation is proud to help fund this important and highly impactful initiative. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions about the Newton School Foundation's ongoing commitment to the calculus project. This letter was signed by our co-presidents, Teresa Fitzpatrick and Karen Manning, and myself, Karen Carol Bennett, Vice President. Thank you.
Thank you. Malika Mendu.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me today. My name is Malika Mendu. I live at 44 Peregrine Road in Newton, Mass. I'm a proud mom of a 2nd and 4th grader at Memorial Spalding. Over 2 months ago, our 4th grader came home upset, and shared that he was no longer going to be receiving homework. A couple of hours later, we received an email from the principal informing us that the 4th and 5th graders would no longer be receiving homework because their teachers felt like homework was of low value and that there were children and parents who were concerned about performing homework and were stressed about homework. There was no opportunity at that point for discussion or feedback. It was clear the decision was made. The principal did receive multiple emails and outreaches from many concerned parents. About a month later, we had a session with the principal where over 30 parents expressed their deep concerns about the elimination of homework. I personally have had multiple conversations with parents in 4th grade who have seen directly the negative impacts of not having homework on their children. In addition, there have been informal surveys completed by parents in the classrooms, and those surveys showed that the majority of parents surveyed, over 90%, favored homework. So I'm here trying my best to represent what I believe is a majority of parents, parents that I've spoken to, parents that have shown up in forums to express their concerns. And some of the key points here, I'll do my best to be brief. Homework represents an important discipline that kids need to develop, particularly as they transition to 6th grade. And many parents with older children reflected this. Homework allows for independent learning and growth outside the classroom, which is how many people learn. It solidifies concepts taught in the classroom and reinforces learning. It provides structured academic learning that instills in kids a sense of responsibility. Many of us are taking it upon ourselves to provide homework to our kids and review it, which is really taxing after a long day and tough to reinforce with the kids. And many of us are worried about the exacerbation of disparities because of this type of workaround, for lack of a better word, for parents who don't have resources or don't have time to be able to do additional work with their kids. And finally, it creates further marginalization of kids who are bright and want to spend time on academics. And it's unfair that other elementary schools that feed into the same middle school and high school do still have homework. So with that, our ask is that Newton kids deserve to have consistency and clarity and fairness related to homework. And if there are concerns about low value homework, the remedy is to improve the value of the homework rather than eliminate it altogether. So with that, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one remote speaker, Anya Pattinson. You can unmute.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Can.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Hello, Newton School Committee. My name is Anya Pattinson and my address is 307 Beacon Street, Newton. My Boston College peers and I are here to advocate for the expansion of supported employment opportunities for adults with physical and intellectual disabilities. In our class, God, Self, and Society, that we are studying at Boston College, they have BC has a supported employment program, also known as SEP. This program places adults with developmental disabilities, also known as clients, in meaningful long-term jobs across campus, including in athletics, the library, dining services, and the School of Nursing. The client is paid the same amount as their neurotypical peers. SEP staff also provide ongoing support to both employees and the departments, helping individuals succeed and grow in these roles. While SEP is incredibly successful, the waiting list for the program is now years long. We believe Newton Public Schools has the opportunity to create a similar program. The Newton Public Schools support individuals with developmental disabilities through special education services up to the age of 22. Creating a supported employment program would allow for a smooth transition for some young adults within this public school system and reduce the surplus in demand in employment opportunities for adults with developmental disabilities. Additionally, for both neurotypical and neurodiverse students alike, it could be greatly beneficial to witness and interact with adults with these types of disabilities, working, contributing, and serving as role models within the school community. Such a program would strongly align with Newton Public Schools' core values of diversity, equity, inclusion, and opportunity. It would also bring practical benefits as individuals in supported employment often remain in their roles long-term, helping reduce staff turnover while filling important positions. We urge the committee to consider developing a supported employment program within Newton Public Schools. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Great. That concludes public comment. We will move to the consent agenda, which contains March 16th meeting minutes. That's it. Would anyone like to pull those from the consent agenda? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Victor, seconded by?
I'll second it.
Ari. Thank you. Let's take a vote. Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7 is yes. Ward 8?
Yes.
Mayor Laredo?
Yes.
All right, consent agenda passes. We will go straight to the superintendent's update.
The man from behind the curtain is going to bring me this now. Yes, thank you. Stephen Retendi, our Director of Technology. So good evening, everyone, and thank you to the public who shared their viewpoints with us this evening. At the close of our meeting on Monday, we were asked, just to bring everyone right back to the last moment we were together, for about 7 reports from various school committee tasks that we were asked to do. 4 were included in the materials for tonight's meeting, so you have all of those, and they're in paper form here, and the public has them online. The rest will be ready tomorrow or by the weekend. So this evening, following up from school committee discussions thus far, there were some decisions placed before the committee throughout this budget process. Are the elementary and middle school arrays the ones you want to follow and the assumptions that you want to use in any budget scenario? So class sizes for elementary or middle school. The superintendent's recommended budget, can it be achieved? I think we've been told that the answer to that is no. So if we don't accept that recommendation of level service, what is the budget number that the school committee would like to vote? So that is just what is before the school committee. Are there different scenarios or analysis that you needed to see today? So on the 16th, I was asked for a request for staff reduction list and operating reductions and assumptions. So they have been provided. They provide a $1.4 million or 11 FTE set of reductions for the school system and a $1.25 million set of operating reductions or assumption revisions. So I just want to share that with folks this evening. In this presentation, I'll talk about how I tried to make some good decisions in a sea of difficult options. But I just want to say that behind each reduction and position title that I'm speaking about tonight is a person in the school district who makes a difference in our organization. They are the people who serve children and the people who serve the people who serve children. They communicate with parents, they train staff, community members, they evaluate staff, they create speedy customer service here in the school system. They care for our facilities or our environment and sustainability goals. They cultivate belonging and ensure that our diverse staff are retained. They ensure efficiency, and they are our colleagues, and they are my colleagues. And while these reductions are contrary to my recommendation for budget, I do understand the formal position of our finances is final. And here is a framework that I have tried to help everyone understand that we have a challenge to close a gap. The priority for me is fully shielding the direct student experience from any additional cuts and retaining critical daily programming to meet the state learning standards for safety, academics, and social emotional learning. So the solution here is that, we've had cuts over many years, as I shared in our first budget presentation this year. So this year, we're seeking to try to absorb these adjustments through central office restructuring, operational shifts, and one-time funding levers. So the move, of course, is from 317.3 as a level service budget recommendation from me to a 314.5 allocation that is available to us this year. I do want to say there are these two aspects that are, quote, new adds to the budget that do need to be sustained. So one is our phone-free middle schools program that's the Yonder program at the middle schools. We know that there is an anticipated state bell-to-bell phone ban before our state legislature. This has been a place where Newton has been well ahead of the curve. Our middle schools are deep into this program with much success, and I think beneficial feedback from parents and kids too, and teachers. Certainly when cell phones came about, I was a middle school principal. I did not relish the constant battle that we had about phones and devices. So of course, this is a mandate that comes from the state without any funding. So it does take a certain amount of man hour for 2 solid hours a day at 4 middle schools, 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening, to touch every single pouch that has every single child's devices in it and to lock and unlock those. So that is that $25,000 cost built into the budget. We received grant and earmark funding for this project previously. The second is the elementary school day expansion of 15 minutes each Wednesday. That's to pay for lunch monitors and paraprofessionals to extend their hours to ensure that all 15 elementary schools meet the state standards for learning time and also do the mandatory seated lunchtime. And that has to be a supervised lunch, which is something that teachers in our elementary schools are not able to shoulder. So those two pieces are included here. I also want to say just to our CPAC colleagues, as you'll see throughout this conversation, we have funded fully transportation in all the recommended budgets for this budget season, my budget allocation or recommendation and the city allocation. We have worked with these reductions to ensure that bridge and day staffing at the day middle school bridge and reflection staffing at the day middle school is intact and expanded by 1 FTE for each program. And the money for the audit of our special education caseloads has already been executed. And we are all eagerly awaiting that study. So this 2.72 additional reductions really tries to recalibrate ongoing district expenses, worked with our city partners to revise estimates for utilities and operations and healthcare since the first time that I presented in the budget. We've talked about it a lot, but we want to talk about it publicly. Use of capital and one-time funding. So shifting some large-scale purchases like the final tranche of our science curriculum adoption. The mayor has generously offered one-time curriculum funding in order for us to do that. We also propose to alter the timeline for summer maintenance projects, which is a practice that has been enacted in the district in the past. It is not one I recommend because we kick things down the road. They eventually have to be addressed. But we do have a now issue relative to balancing the budget. And of course, reducing our central office headcount and pausing district-wide internship programs absorb the financial impact away from the classroom, which is our core mission. So here's my graphic representation of this moment of central office staffing is reduced by $1.45 million. One-time projects, summer ones, delayed, reduces our budget by $500,000. We've made some re-estimates of healthcare insurance, and our city partners have assured us that this number can be reduced of $437,000 less than our initial projection. We will remove $325,000 from our teaching and learning budget to be provided by free cash funds from the city. This does mean that we start the next year with $325,000 less in our budget than we would this year. But we have momentum with that particular department, and we made assurances to those teachers about the materials that would come to them. We do have a district internship program which helps with our co-taught classes. It is not required for our co-taught classes, but it is how we engender the pipeline of next generation special education teachers in the district. That's a partnership with Boston College and Regis College and a few other locations. So we are loath to eliminate that, but in a time like this, we might need to do that. We did a utilities re-estimate and then, of course, added the reflections and bridge teachers at day. added the adjustments for the 15 minutes for elementary school, level funded the calculus project. So in that way, given the funding from the NSF that has been communicated to us, we are able to add back $44,000 of funding that reduces the deficit. We will also add the Yonder Middle School pouches. So that gets us to the 314.5 city allocation. So most of our budget is people, and 100% of what we do daily is people who help build young people. So that is difficult in terms of making decisions about reductions. So the blue circle you see here is central operations and pipeline reductions, but we are preserving the classroom experience. I know we heard some discussion about class sizes here tonight, but we are trying to sustain a reasonable class sizes so that students can get the good number of attention and space and time and resources at every level and sustain that throughout our K-12, K-22 experience. I spoke about the reductions that I'm putting forward here. I do just want to say that I did send these positions to the school committee last night, and they include staff from Human Resources, the DEI department, the 2 from the business office, the superintendent's office, student programs, 2 supervisors of Unit B, social, emotional, and behavioral staff, and 2 custodians here at the Ed Center, totaling 11.5 reductions in staff FTE. So these are difficult for us and certainly will change the way we operate, but we understand that we are constrained in terms of our finances. So I do want to say that while this may restrict our operations in a new way, it does protect our classroom, which is the heart of what our mission is, so that teaching and learning can be preserved in NPS buildings. So that concludes what I was asked to share with the school committee this evening.
Right. Thank you, Superintendent Nolan. I want to acknowledge the difficult conversations that you, your leaders, and impacted colleagues have had over the past 24 hours regarding reducing the central office positions. They might be boxes on the slide, but they're humans, every one of them, and these are always hard. Should those reductions be confirmed by the committee, along with the additional budget reductions that you listed, we will have reached the mayor's allocation, as you've noted. But that's without the middle school math program. If we want to do the math program, we need the additional $1 million in cuts. So we still face the problem that we faced in our first meeting on March 9th, a $1 million problem if we want to do math. Our thinking caps have been on. Thank you, Ari, for the, we're going to beat that one into the ground analogy. And I'd like to share a couple of the ideas that the finance group has brought forward to the city. Understanding that the city's allocation will not change, we focused on free cash options. We suggested a free cash funded 3-year investment in MTSS math for the middle schools. This would be a $1 million per year for 3 years. It would create a $1 million gap at the end of 3 years, but at that point, it should be okay because 2 things should be true. The middle school math implementation of compacted curriculum and adding the 9th grade math will be complete, and that should free up some of the MTSS resources. We know that middle school needs MTSS resources regardless of curriculum. But also the elementary MTSS program will be in year 4. And if we see anything like what we have seen at Ainger, we should be saving at least $1 million across the system. So that was one idea. We have also brought forward the idea of starting a special education stabilization fund funded by free cash. These funds are very common in other districts, and they can be used to stabilize the budget against the volatility of things like out-of-district tuitions. This could be funded one time this year, and then we could take on more risk in our tuition assumptions, freeing up money for the MTSS middle school math, and we could do that because we would know we'd have this fund to backstop any overage. The mayor has heard our ideas, he's taken them into consideration, ultimately declining them now, but I bring them to this discussion because I believe both are good ways to invest in our schools without increasing the base, and I hope they'll be considered again in the future. I will keep knocking on that door. I think we're at a point where the math is just really hard right now. The city allocation of 5.75% on the corrected base from last year represents a $17.1 million more for operations than we used last year. With salary increases of $12 million and healthcare increases of 4.4, that immediately leaves us with only $700,000 for everything else, which then gets eaten up right away by transportation alone, not to mention utilities and everything. So it's just a really hard spot. And so as you've heard, the superintendent has outlined many difficult cuts to get to where we are right now without math. If we want to do math, we're going to have to weigh additional cuts with doing math. So that's kind of the set of trade-offs that we'll have to review. With that, I'd like to open for discussion. Here, Laredo.
So I appreciate all the heartfelt desire to have even more money for the schools. As the chair just stated, not only is the budget increase 5.75% above the adjusted base, but if you add in the adjusted base, that is over a 7% increase in the budget. And I don't recall, and I can be corrected, any time in the last 10 years when there's been that 7% increase in the budget, in addition to the one-time $325,000 allocation that we're putting out there. So I understand and hear the disappointment of some in the room that we are not allocating even more to the school budget. And if I had unlimited funds, we'd do that. But part of my job as mayor, and it's a difficult job, I'm not asking for sympathy, it's what I signed up for, is not only providing for the schools, which is getting the lion's share of the increase in funding, but we still need to provide for police, fire, trash, older adult services, parks and recreation, the things that do benefit all the residents of the city. And those are the trade-offs and balances that we make all the time. We worked very hard internally to do what we felt we could possibly do for the schools without jeopardizing the core functions of the rest of city government. That's a challenge for us. So I appreciate the chair's suggestion about additional one-time funding. The short answer, as I said before, is we're not going to do it. And the reason we're not going to do it in part is because I have said early on in this process, we are not going to present a lowball number to the school committee and the superintendent and then say, well, we'll bridge that with free cash. That's been done in the past. We're not doing that. We are coming out upfront with what we have. And again, it's a 7+% increase. 7+%. So that's where we are. When we do next year's budget, we are going to go through the same process. We are going to provide the best we can upfront and not resort, frankly, to using one-time funds after we've given a low number to the schools. I'll just add this. I really do appreciate the superintendent's effort here. This is not easy for any superintendent at all. If I were in her shoes, and probably thank goodness I'm not, I would be saying I really need more. Doing any cuts to what I think is in the best interest of the system is very hard. She's made trade-offs. She's made choices. I respect those choices. If I had my personal druthers, would I try to move some money around and put it into math and move money elsewhere? Maybe, but I'm not the educational expert here. Superintendent is. And so I really, at least for me, need to defer to the superintendent's judgment, subject, of course, to what others on this committee have to say, because I'm one of 9 and I'm certainly open to moving or changing on that. But again, I want to reiterate, I want to thank the superintendent. I want to be clear about it. I want to be public about it. We have an outstanding superintendent. She is doing her job to advocate for the schools. She has done it extraordinarily well, both publicly and privately. She continues to do that. She's going to continue to do that when this budget process is done.
Glad we're clear on the rules. I'm glad you understand.
So thank you, Madam Chair.
Tyler, and then Jonathan.
Mr. Loretto, I know I've alluded to this at times in past discussions, but I think that it is important that I am a bit more direct. It is very clear to me that despite the efforts that you have made to show voters your passion for education, you are not aiding schools in the way that you're claiming is important. I found that our second and third commenters, along with Ms. Armstrong's comments, very true. I don't understand what the point of these discussions are if you're just putting your foot down and not cooperating like you're claiming you are going to. I can't help but think back to my time in Day's 8th grade civics classes where we talked all about checks and balances. It is very clear to me that students, teachers, parents, and fellow politicians are all calling for your compromise, and I truly believe that it is your responsibility to listen to the people you are representing, making decisions for, and checking your decisions to reevaluate your position. You can try to not care about numbers on a spreadsheet of programs being cut, but the people in this room who have spoken are the people who feel it every day. You walk through the building once, but I am there every day. I'm watching as some of my favorite educators have their positions cut due to budget issues. I'm watching as mental health staff are overwhelmed because of the need for additional support. I'm watching as faculty can't fill all the roles they've been asked to do because they're doing so much more than their job descriptions. These educators are some of the hardest working people in the world. The efforts of NPS adults have shaped me into the person that I am today. I do not speak in hyperbole when I say these people have saved my life. I am disappointed because you are not sustaining NPS. You are sitting by while all of these people around you are telling you that you are letting down the community. I'm not going to continue to play this game of thanking you and dancing around these issues that are so apparent to everybody that this is affecting. My job sitting in this chair is representing the students that elected me. All of your jobs are representing the people who elected you. I am baffled as to why this discrepancy exists. We are 11 people sitting at this table. You're trying to say the decisions you're making are for them. It's not. There are thousands of voices outside of here that are not being given the same weight. We cannot keep operating believing this small group of people know more than the real people this is affecting. I'm not going to beseech you for your approval. I just need you to know this because it is painful to hear you saying you know more than everybody else you have heard from recently in this process. Thank you.
Jonathan, then Victor.
I can sort of dig into whatever I want here in this conversation. I want to clarify something, and then I'd like to share some thoughts on where I'm at.
As it pertains to the budget
It
discussion.
all pertains to the budget. Okay. I don't know whether this question, Dr. Nolan, is best suited for you or for Liam. I see Liam in the room. I'm working my way through the entirety of the budget book. I am grateful for its length and comprehensiveness. I agree that this was a critically needed document in order for all of us to engage in it, and so I'm grateful for that. I have asked several times in this process, and I want to make sure that my understanding is correct about how I should understand the carry forward. And so I don't want there to be any ambiguity, and I want us all to be clear and on the record on what the mechanism is and how it plays through the budget.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding of the carry forward is that right now, as a school system, we are implementing cost control measures, a hiring freeze, a purchasing restriction, et cetera, in the name of saving $2.5 million that we can spend next year. That I've got that part correct. Is that right? So we're gonna have $2.5 million in a cash account someplace, and we're gonna go dip into that as part of the spending plan associated with the 317. Is that the right way to understand that?
I think that's the right way to understand that. I think you saw that chart that had the $18.3 million gross tuition.
Yep.
Subtracting out the expected tuition that we get next year, and then the carry forward. So that carry forward that we would have from this year goes into next year as a revenue source to offset that tuition. So yes.
Got it. Okay.
I just want to explain to you that if we did not have to carry forward to pay for next year's budget, we would not be having the issue of, for the reason of the spending freeze. We would not be spending freeze at all, because that would be the way that we would try to control spending if we had some sort of overage, like move-in students that we hadn't anticipated, enrollment bubbles, like suddenly there's a kindergarten class with 35 kids in it. So that's how superintendents generally deal with those kind of emergency moments. We don't have that luxury because we have to save for next year's budget.
Got it. That part is clear to me. My second question is, in the proposal for 2027, there is clearly revenue or source of funds that is $2.5 million. Is there a line item dedicated to saving $2.5 million next year to spend in 2028? Or are we planning to spend all of the city's allocation plus the $2.5 million that we've saved from this year?
It's a great question. So the way that we would need to end up doing it, this is the kind of the cycle that we've been in.
I'm going to be super difficult here.
Yep.
Is there a line item in the budget? Is there a plan in the budget, a use of cash, which is putting $2.5 million in a savings account for 2028?
No.
Are we planning to do that?
No.
Okay. So we are setting ourselves up for a place where if the city at some point next year says that there is a carry forward requirement of $2.5 million for 2028, we are careening headlong into another hiring freeze and another spending freeze.
May I be?
That's right.
I got to be clear, Jonathan. The
Please.
city never says that you have to carry forward money. That's a decision of the school system. Okay?
Please continue.
That's it. That's the decision of the school system, not
Okay.
the city.
So
The city provides an allocation. The school system decides whether it's going to carry forward the money or not. I think the relevant question for the assistant superintendent is show us an actual spend to budget as of now. Where are we? That's the real operative question to see how much money is going to be carried forward.
I'll let you respond to that, but I don't see it that way.
I don't think you need to, Liam. We've
Okay.
been over this case.
Okay.
So if that was the case, then there would be $2.5 million more in our budget allocation. So we've gotten ourselves in this loop several years ago. None of us, we were not partnering on this, and that was something that occurred.
For all
Now we
intents and
can't get out of the hole.
Okay. So for all intents and purposes, the way to understand the way we're setting ourselves up for next year, let's just assume for a moment, which I don't want to assume because I don't like it and I'm not supportive of it, but let's just assume for a moment that we say the allocation is 314. The reality is that it is, I mean, on a run rate basis, 311. Okay. Okay. That's a problem.
Clarifying point on this?
Yes, go ahead.
I think that's right. And then the only important thing to add to that is you would want to make the same adjustment to this year's budget, which was had a carry forward of 3.25 million. So
Hey.
you would, you'd be doing it. We've got in the habit, and I agree, we don't want to be in this habit, but there's not a clear way to climb out of it, right? Because on a run rate basis, if you had 2.5 million every year,
You could
never
just cross
changed
it out.
that, it'd be like nothing were happening.
get it.
And it's just a weird accounting thing.
I get it. Okay.
So it's when the level changes that you have impacts to the budget. We had 3.25 in this year's budget, and we're planning for 2.5 million in next year's budget. That reduction actually means that we have $750,000 that we can't deploy on other things next year. It's the change that hurts.
Okay. I mean, the problem is the notion of setting ourselves up for a spending rate that we won't meet, that we won't be able to fund. That's the problem. It's not the change rate. It's the absolute reality of the water level isn't actually what we say it is.
Right.
If you look at the, with and without the carry forward, and if you imagine, for example, that we were planning not for a $2.5 million carry forward, but a $3.25 million carry forward, the actual percentage change in the budget would be equivalent to what we've been talking about, which is a 5.75. I don't think on an absolute basis I'm disagreeing with you.
Yep.
I don't think on an accounting practice basis I'm disagreeing with anyone. But if we don't find a money tree somewhere, climbing out of this practice will cost us in that particular year however much we shave down the carry forward.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that is troubling about the way to think about the way I understand this, or the way I think about this, is that the way out of this that doesn't set us up for a continual need to have spending freezes and does set us up for the ability to do what we say we're going to do is actually to plan for a budget next year that is $2.5 million lower still than what the superintendent has said she's going to get to, or excuse me, could get to through the cuts that we're looking at here. That's, I mean, just the cold reality of like the way the math works. It's unconscionable, but it is like the
Victor's
cold
looking at- 'cause
reality.
you're to the, not, okay.
I just want to, I want to be clear, in the city side, okay, if the department doesn't spend everything, that goes back to free cash. Okay, there's no carry forward on the city side. The school department has kept that money and carried it forward. Jonathan, I think you're right that we have gotten ourselves in a position before any of us were here, to be very clear, gotten ourselves in a, maybe
I was
you
here. Yeah.
but you're accepted. I'm not holding you responsible.
There's a reason. There's a reason.
The money
Wasn't his idea.
In an ideal world, you would have you're going to have some carry forward because you're never going to precisely budget, and you got to have a little bit of overage every year. Ideally, you don't want to be below, but you'd be probably in the $750,000 million range.
That's like a rounding thing that most people understand as like, you know, I make X dollars a month. I plan to spend X minus, you know, $10. I'm going to have $10 left over. And like, whether you have $10 left over or not, it's like, it's okay. This is like a structural problem that we've created.
You're absolutely right. And if you were going to get away from that, you would have to change the trajectory, whether you do it in 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. So you reduce your dependency on that carry forward. That is a healthy budget thing to do. I would not recommend personally trying to do it all in 1 year, because that would be really kind of a shock to the system.
So I understand all. Thank you for clarifying. I now feel like I have the definitive facts that I need to have a point of view on how that comes together. I have a point of view on what I've understood here. Am I allowed to continue, keep the floor here and continue to sort of share some thoughts? Before I maybe get into the core thoughts that I have on where we seem to have found ourselves, I want to say a couple of things. I think the first is that to our educators and administrators, like I cannot imagine watching a decision to fund my job get debated over multiple weeks in a public forum. The personal economic uncertainty coupled with the implied value of my contribution to the city and the school system that I believe that most of our educators fundamentally love is unbearable. And I think that it's not clear to me that there's any way out of that in a public process here. But it has honestly been like extremely painful for me to watch and for me to participate in as a new member of the school committee. I have attempted to watch what is a new process that I have not participated in before play out as a way to understand what's going on. I didn't run for this office on a platform of fiscal austerity. I don't think that anybody in this room did or wanted that to be how this came together. And I don't like nothing since November has changed that, right? I think when I watched folks hyperventilate about the amount of money we spent on Newton North High School, I felt deep pride in both what we had created as well as in the city's decision that that was what we valued and how we wanted to spend our money and how we wanted to demonstrate our values. That makes it, to be honest with you, very difficult to answer my son's questions about like, what are we going to do about the fact that the Bowen roof is leaking, right? That's embarrassing, I think, for all of us. It's embarrassing for me. I think it is critical that the mayor has started to acknowledge the state of the budget and started to break the will we, won't we baseline versus free cash nightmare that we have all been trapped in for the last several years. I think getting clear on what it costs to actually run the schools and making an enduring commitment to funding that the superintendent and our educators and our families can rely on is critically important. And so I believe that we are headed in the right direction. I do, however, really struggle with how we've gotten to a place that that City Hall has set an allocation for a budget in advance of having gone through this budget process and allowed this to play out and gained a collective understanding of like what it is that we're actually going to fund. I think, the choice to allocate dollars across the city for me is, a question of do we fund, we frame it as, do we fund the schools, or do we fund fire, or do we fund roads, or do we fund all of those things? And the challenge is that like the schools, I don't think is a thing, right? The question that we're wrestling with, I think, as a team and as a city and as citizens and voters and school committee members is, are we going to fund class sizes? Are we going to fund professional development? Are we going to fund the opportunities that we've said that we're going to create for our students? Those are the things that we're trading off. Are we going to fix the Bowen roof, right? And I don't know how, as a city, we get consensus on where we want that value to be if we're not letting this process play out before we come to that conclusion. And so that, for me, I've really struggled with. I also think, honestly, that framing what we need to get done here in a rate of increase is really hard, because the truth is we're in a place where rate of increases, while relevant to how you compare school growth to city revenue growth, are a thing. They have, as we have seen, I think, in this process, next to nothing to do with what the actual needs of the schools are and where we got to get ourselves to and what it is that we need to do this year, next year, over the next couple of years to actually dig ourselves out of this hole. And the thing that concerns me most, less about this year's proposal, is that what we're setting ourselves up for here provides zero visibility into how we get ourselves out of this hole right now. If we are in a place where we have 5% contract, literally inflation of the overall budget driven 5% by compensation, like you're stuck. Like that, like a 4 handle on the next year's raise is like better than a 3 handle. It's better than not telling anybody what it is that we're going to provide, but it is simply not adequate to solve the problem. And so the thing that I struggle with at the moment is I don't understand how what we're doing here connects to actually solving the problem. I also struggle a lot with the idea that there's a bunch of fat in the school system. I do believe that there are places where we can go get money over time. I think there are places that pay dividends as things come together. But, we've spent, I don't know how many hours in this room arguing over $20,000 and $50,000 line items in the budget. Maybe we've found $100,000. I don't know. But I would also argue that on a $300 million budget run by Dr. Nolan and her team, it is charitably a waste of the public's time to be nitpicking over $20,000 in the budget. And so I think that piece of this process has frustrated me immensely, and I think is a difficult place to be. I also think if you look at just the data that we've all had, we are charitably mid-pack on what we spend on students. If we were so far fat in all of these places, we would be out of bed on that chart in some way, and we are not. And so I think it doesn't pass the sniff test there. I also refuse to believe that Dr. Nolan, if there was millions of dollars lying around on the floor here, would be instituting the kind of measures that we're instituting in the schools. And so I struggle with that a lot, all of which sort of like brings me back to this place where like we need to figure out as a city how to invest in the things that will pay dividends over time without doing that on the back of our students, because that is like, to my mind, sort of unconscionable. So I'm gonna pause there because I feel like I've gone on for quite a while. My hope is that as the school committee has done its work and Dr. Nolan has done her work in figuring out what it is that we need and what the stakes are and what the values that the things that we need and want to invest in as a city are, my hope is that we can take that into account, not because we're going to continue to lean into the way that we think about continuing to the one-time funding problem, but because we've done the work and we understand what the issues are and we have an opinion. And so I don't think I've offered any solutions in this narrative, but I feel like we're a lot further away at the moment from what it is that we actually need to be doing as a school committee and as a city than we've kind of admitted to ourselves. And so that is my concerted point of view at the moment.
Thank you. Do you have a...
Thank you, Member Green. I just wanted to say that cities do have the equivalent of a carry forward with continuing appropriations. So there's many ways that cities do exactly the same, or legal funds or other things. And there are times, in my previous life where we were able to give money back to free cash. I would love to be able to do that. I would love to be able to contribute our part and have like, bring me that task of saving that money. I don't feel like I can get out of this hole that I'm in so that I can even show that capacity for the school system. Not that my job is to bring back money to the city, but we do our part as a partner in the ecosystem, and we feel frustrated that we cannot get out of that hole either.
Victor and then Tamika.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Drama. I was going to almost suggest that we sell the rights to Hollywood of the soap opera to get rights and funding here, but maybe that's too early a joke to make. So yeah, too early. I think there's a couple of thank you. Keep me honest here. There's sort of two themes that I want to start surfacing that already been surfaced, which I want to reiterate. I think one that is very valid, and I empathize with the mayor here, is that there are a bunch of other demands on city resources. But as we all know, our job is to fight for the schools in this particular instance. And I will give you a lot of credit, I think, in your listening tours, and even I think to Josh Morse's credit, I think some of the Facebook posts on showing like the police department did show that there are genuine challenges that exist outside the city. So I do want to acknowledge that first. I think that is an important thing. And I think there was a very valid point that I could be remembering this incorrectly. Since I think the last mayor to even come close to a 5% change was our rest in peace, beloved Seti Warren. So you're absolutely right. This is whether we count it as 5.7 or 7% year over year. That is a significant difference, and I do want to acknowledge. I think that's a very, very big, an important recognition of things. The point I guess I would raise is that while we haven't necessarily seen that same raise in the past 10 years, which is entirely true, I'd argue we're not in the same position as any time in the last 10 years either. Like, we have healthcare costs that are completely different now than they have been. No thanks to our friends in the White House. And we also have challenges with, the subs, right? And so I think there's many different things that are going on where the moment is different from where the past decade was. And that's where I'm trying to struggle with how do you sort of square the circle, to be honest. And so we've done a lot of work, I think, trying to think through what are potential ways to solve. And my natural instinct is to say, hey, let's go do sort of the problem solving moment. I do think if, one of the challenges is the need for substitutes. That's something we need to work. I've said this a lot of times in partnership with our teachers and our educators to figure out how do we over time reduce absences. There will always be some that are necessary. Healthcare costs are going to be very difficult. I think I've been educated myself very much over the past few sessions that there's only so much we can do on that end, but those are growing somewhere around 9 to 11% year over year, right? So even 7% as an amazing one is still not sufficient. The one I guess I'm struggling with a little bit still is, when we think about things that we can adjust, pension timetables are not within our control, but those are one of the potentially bigger things down the road that we could manage. Even things like fundraising or naming rights or other creative solutions that we have are going to take time to implement, right? Even for a team that's just been voted in for 3 months now. So the question to me then is, what do you have left? And I certainly don't want to pay more taxes, but this is again, where I'm beating sort of the dead horse here, but I do think this just shows how much more of an urgency there is for an override discussion. Yes, we're not going to get it done by June, but I hope anybody who's listening sees the tension that's in here, and there aren't that many magic solutions left. And that's why I'm pushing on that dimension. So the question is, if one of those bigger changes is, and it's not going to be easy, it's going to take a lot of effort to explain to our our fellow Newtonians why we would think about an override. You need to bridge the gap. You need to find a way to get to that point. How do you buy the time to be able to do that? And that's where I know we may have a slight disagreement on this, but that's where I'm wondering, to me, that education stabilization fund is, though something we don't want to recurrently draw down on, I currently agree there, this is a potential path to bridge that time so we can get to those town hall conversations to start building that momentum that I can't do individually as just one person, but collectively we need to, if that's indeed going to be one of the very few ways that we can actually significantly move the needle and avoid the recurring theme that we just hear over and over again, right? Again, Not easy. I know there's different timetables that everybody has in terms of whether they want to discuss it and if they want to do it within 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. You know, my feeling is the time is now. Can we find some sort of solution to bridge the 1 million, at least for Math Pathways and possibly more, so that we can buy that time necessary to do so? And again, I know it's not easy, but this is the one that's inherently what I'm wrestling with, because I just don't see any other magic solutions in the moment.
We'll go to Tamika and then the mayor.
Thank you, Alicia. So real quick on the carry forward, Jonathan, I hear your frustration regarding that. Prior to Superintendent Nolan joining Newton, I would say most people, including our chief financial officer over there, and the school committee, and the then superintendent, and the interim superintendent, viewed the carry forward as a necessary, unliked savings fund. It was a way to pull from this year's budget and fund into the next. I would say when the superintendent joined, she said, I don't see that as a savings fund. I see that as taking money, needed money, necessary money out of my pocket, out of my this year budget. And she's not wrong. It's true. The fix to get out of that will mean at any given year, when you're trying to eradicate ourselves from this encumbrance that we've self-inflicted, you're going to have to either be willing to reduce by that amount into the next year, or have some type of way of replenishing those funds that you're guaranteed into that next year. So that's the first point. The second is that I realize that this is a brand new process for everyone up here, except for Mayor Laredo and Superintendent Nolan and myself. It struck me that none of you, including Alicia, has ever, and Victor, has ever been through an NPS budget approval process from the start all the way to the glorious, praise God, we get to sleep now, finish. And that's important because you don't understand what to look for, and you don't understand how to do this really challenging things. Even having done it, I still don't do it. I'm not trying to profess to be any type of expert, but I have my methodology that I love. I go through the book with my sticky tape and my highlighter and my pen, and I look. One of the first things I do is I say, okay, compared to what I'm seeing here, what are the open positions that NPS currently has listed on our website? And I think, are there a lot of crossover there? This year I did that, and there's not that much. There are some open positions. A lot of them are like coaches and things, but there's a few on there that I'm wondering about. And, I'll get to those questions in a minute. The next point I wanted to raise is that I would love for us to see a shift in how we arrive at the allocation from the mayor. Newton has a very strong mayoral system where the mayor gets to determine the allocation for the school. I would love for us to determine the allocation to the school a little bit maybe later in the process. I know there's a lot of back channel communication between the school committee leadership and the mayor's financial team, and you have a place to start. I think that place to start would be better served if it was a bit more fluid through this process. That's just an observation. The next is that educational funding as a practice, as a norm, is such a broken quagmire of what we're doing right now. I would love it if all of the people who turn out every year that I've been a member and going back before, who come out and advocate strongly for increased allocation from our mayor, would bring that passion to our state reps, would bring that passion to our federal reps, though right now they're not going to get any quarter there. But the point remains that this needs to be a fix, that not just Newton can't do it just for us, that the fix is necessary. And Victor, your drumbeat about an override, I'm going to start joining you, because if we want to fix, that is the fix. Newton residents need to say, we are not going to be in this perpetual cycle of drips and drabs and cuts and slices and eroding all of the things that we feel like, well, hold on, we just got that. We fought hard for it, and now it's being eliminated. That's not a position that I think most voters would support or endorse. So I will join you in that mission, Victor. Because Jonathan, when you were saying, how do we invest in our schools without putting this on the back of our students? That's it. It's an override that's going to give us that oomph, that breathing room, that thrive room, that how do we get their answer? And right now we don't have that answer. So we have to do the thing that none of you want to do, which is what you were elected to do, the hard math, the getting to the 3.14 number. Or 314, sorry, not 3.14. So among the proposed staff reductions, questions now. Are there any open positions among the detailed list of staff reductions? Are all of those currently filled by active employees that are in NPS?
Yes.
So every single one, including the custodian positions, which typically.
Yes.
Okay. How about if I was to do a line-by-line review, which I'm with Jonathan working my way through it,
Mm-hmm.
Are there any open positions contained within the budget proposals, meaning currently not filled by an actual person who works in the district that I could go shake hands with and meet?
Well, if someone just went on leave, we might have an open position, or if someone just resigned, or, I mean, anything that's on the website is current right now. So what you saw when you did your perusal is what is currently current. But I just want to say, like, if that's a fourth grade teacher that we're trying to hire because they just went on leave, I can't sub out like the person at central office for that person's role.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So barring any anomalies of people leaving for some justified, valid reason and having to replace that, everyone here that's a person.
Yeah.
That's a member of this staff.
That's right.
Drilling down on the recommendation for one of the particular positions, no surprise, I was very surprised to see the inclusion of the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion listed for reduction. So last year, Anna, you made a reorganization which included this particular member of our staff. The reorganization from that time was moving the DEI director from a DEI director standalone position into HR, with the stated reason at the time being to provide additional supports owing to the magnitude of the job, to allow this position to be able to rely on there being additional folks in a department to assist with the scope of the role.
So the difference there is we wanted to expand our retention and actively recruiting. She needed support if she was going to take on that tenet of our new strategic plan, which had that as a core tenet. So we attached her to human resources because that is also their core mission.
Understood. And I agree. I was skeptical, not skeptical, but it was a change. And so keeping an open mind to the change, the reasons are justified or were rational and they made sense. This year, however, a reduction of that role, 0.5 reduction, if it was a big enough position a year ago to justify needing additional folks to do the role, how do you foresee a half-time commitment being sufficient? Will it be?
So we're going to have to distribute some of her other roles to other individuals within the organization, and there will need to be more things put back into human resources, which were previously held by human resources.
So
I do also want to say that we've hired across our central office team folks who have some of the expertise that that director also has. That doesn't mean it's a replacement for all that she brings to our system. And I am not happy to be having this conversation. So I need you to know that. But I need to look across what is essential to operate right now. And I can make a reduction of 0.5 and still operate all of the core functions of the central office.
So I understand that it's not a position you want to be in.
Mhm.
I'm not, that's not the point I'm making at all.
Mhm.
The point I am elevating is, once again, we are faced with the prospect of eliminating, because I can't foresee somebody who's been a director of a role down to a half-time position being satisfied with that. I don't know. You're going to have to show me that that one works. I don't see that it does. But that being said, such a hard fought and important role, and a large one across the district. When Kathy Lopes started in the role in 2020, she was as a full-time director, assisted by an administrative, or with an assistant and an administrative support. She was tasked with educator staff training, consulting with our schools and non-discrimination policy, advising on incidents of discrimination, working to create the LaSalle partnership for our NPS paraprofessionals of color. There was a DEI advisory function that serviced educators across our schools. She organized teachers. She was organized under teaching and learning, which also made sense. So I've seen this step back from that high water mark each and every year since. And it's really a gross abdication of our commitment to this particular field of work. The diversity, equity, and inclusion that NPS is promising has, I feel like it's substantially impacted, and in a way that I can't support. I don't know where we go. I don't know where we go with that one, but it's really sad that we have to be here. And I think there are many families who are going to feel equally as gutted by the fact that something that we worked hard to achieve is now going away. And that's a shame. I'm going to finish up by, I sent you an email a couple of days ago, or it might have been, I don't know, time is weird, about the viable Plan B options for the math interventionists. I call it that because it was, if 8 is the number, and 8 is the ideal, 8's the goal, 8's the number of 8 interventionists in middle school is what we want to roll out the middle school pathway. What can you do with less? 4 gets you halfway there, all the way there. If you shrink the program to its very most necessary components, because I don't want us to throw away that good idea. It's important, and I don't want us to put a pause on something that many, many families and students are eager for. But if we can't do it all, how do we get to some of it within this budget? Is there a way?
So there is a report in your packet answering all the questions that you sent us. So there's detailed stuff there. It's really, the committee has to understand just what was explained by one of our speakers earlier tonight. This is a several component scenario. 1, we are compacting curriculum in grades 6 and 7 so that we are making the curriculum more rigorous by 1 year each year of middle school. We already have students who are below benchmark in the general education curriculum in grade 8 mathematics now, in 6th grade, in 7th grade, and 8th grade. So we have to still help those students meet the old standards and get to the new standards before they progress to the new paradigm. We then have the need and the very loud voices of families saying, I have advanced math students who need a different curriculum there. We need to then adopt all of the curriculum at all of the grade levels. All of those things have to be accelerated by math support. So when you say to me, can you do it with 50%? So what will we take off their plate? So much like I'm gutted by the reduction that you just discussed about for DEI, it's exactly the same. Do we only do sixth grade? Do we only do eighth grade? Do we only do advanced? Do we only do the intervention for the students below grade level? So like it's like trying to cover this table with a napkin. That's how I feel. And I have seen too many education initiatives be done on the cheap to exhaust the teachers and frustrate the parents and the kids. And I just don't want to promise something. And then with a laid down 5% allocation next year, we're cutting again next year. And I just don't want to, I don't want to die by all these cuts either. So, I mean, that's where I sit, that like, I'm the person driving the change agenda. I want it. I brought it. I listened. I went to 5,000 barbecues while all I talked about was math. You know, so I want it. I also want to be clear that we've been driving the organization very hard towards a lot of change. And if we don't have the right supports for this, the change management will kill it, all of it.
So we need the 8.
I think
in order
we need
for
it.
this to work.
Yeah,
I
and
think short of that will suffice.
I just don't know what part of it we would cut out without creating a whole other equity problem that we would need to be dealing with here.
And is 8 the number? That's the number
is the
that you
number.
say foresee into the next year's budget and the year after that. It's not a start, it's the finish.
Well, I would like to tell you that we can work ourselves out of a job with interventionists, but I've been doing this for 30 years and you haven't had interventionists for a long time. And you have elementary students coming up in a program that is not as rigorous as the thing they're about to enter. So you're going to need that pipeline for a little while.
For middle school math,
that's right.
8 is that's the number.
That
you
is
can
2
see
per
do
building. Correct.
Many, many years, if not perpetually.
Well,
Budget.
I can't.
God's dependent.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you that. I actually am looking forward to going through the math assessment process so we know the landscape a little bit clearer. I mean, depending on who you talk to, you know, people describe their children in a certain way. Our teachers describe them in a certain way. I would like to see through that placement process where we're going to put students. That will be, I can give you a very accurate answer after April when we do the tests.
Right.
But 8 is the number that as we schedule it out, and Dr. Colby has scheduled this out with every single middle school, and we have, there just isn't anybody to redeploy for this. All the teachers are teaching general education classes. There's no one that I can say, well, you can skip teaching 6th grade and I'll stick you in as an interventionist. We just don't have that. And to be fair, we didn't have it at the elementary either. Dr. Farag and Dr. Colby rescheduled and took existing interventionists and support staff of old, and for a cost neutral benefit to the system, took 59 FTEs and put them into 12 more highly trained Unit A specialist teachers who are now at the elementary school. So that was a reorganization that was quite significant last year. We don't have those people here. They don't have even lower salary or lower FTE interventionists anywhere in the middle schools. There's one person through Title I at Bigelow, and that's it.
So I appreciate the complexity of the problem. Thank you for entertaining the diligence of which is what we have to do, thinking about alternatives beyond the ideals.
Yep.
And you know, I support the MTSS. I hope. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm good.
Let's say, you know, so we're going to purchase the curriculum no matter what. We have those funds. And, you know, so what we can do is pause the implementation with students, but work with the teachers to, it'll be slower because we don't have people boots on the ground in the building, but we can work at the district level to try to implement the curriculum over time and try again in a subsequent year. And I guess I just want to say thank you for advocating for the full package for the students. Yes, for the belonging and the equity and the inclusion, but also for this academic opportunity for them. I mean, I feel like we're at odds with our cultural values in this discussion. I appreciate you bringing them back up.
Mayor Laredo and then Jason.
Thank you. So I want to be very clear about a few things. We didn't come to this allocation lightly. We sat down, my team sat down with the superintendent and the school committee leadership, and the superintendent outlined what was going to be in her, what she would want in her budget, what were her needs. So we heard that. This wasn't just an abstract number. The school committee and the superintendent rightly asked us, what is the allocation? Because we need to put a budget together. We need to understand that. My team and I sat down and said, balancing all of the needs in the city, this is what the allocation could be. So I just want to be clear. We just didn't make up a number and say, here it is, take it or leave it. This was much more of an iterative process. And frankly, when we started, I would have been at a lower allocation. But the superintendent was extraordinarily persuasive, along with the school committee leadership. And we went back and said, this is what we can do. So I want to be very clear about this. I also need to talk about the use of free cash, because it's very important that we're all operating on the same wavelength here. We created that Ed Stabilization Fund, I think, 3 or 4 years ago now, because we had an extraordinarily large amount of one-time free cash because of a settlement with some utilities and very high interest rates of return. We had, if I'm not mistaken, $45 or $50 million of free cash. We never have $50 million of free cash. And the decision was made at the time, and I think it was a wise decision, take a good chunk of that money, put in an Ed Stabilization Fund, allow it to earn interest over time, and take a chunk of that money each year and use it to help the school system, which is exactly what we've done. So what we are doing in our budgeting is we don't want to have the large amounts of free cash that we have had previously. Why? Because the large amounts of free cash, I think, lead to artificially reduced available funds for the operating budget, for the school budget. That's one of the reasons we are able to go up to the 5.75 adjusted, is because we are actually relying on assumptions that over the next few years, may not be precisely next year, but over the next few years, we actually may have less free cash. So we are not going to be using free cash to create these stabilization funds or one-time, even multi-year funding of a math program. I want to give that money to schools right up front. I want the schools to have that money as part of the operating budget so that the superintendent, consulting with the school committee, can make those decisions in real time with real dollars, knowing what's going to be there. 2 other things that I think I want to emphasize. We are working, and we're going to talk about publicly in the next couple of weeks, some efforts to change the trajectory of our pension fund obligations, which I think, as everyone at this table knows, is putting extraordinary pressure on the school system and on the city as a whole. We're going to do this year's budget. We're committed. But going forward in outgoing years, what we're projecting is based on those kind of fixes that we are hoping to establish. So I want to be very clear here. I actually do not want to be using free cash for things that are not really a free cash issue. And in response to questions about leaking roofs and things of that nature, those are capital expenditures that the city pays for. We pay for boiler replacements, for example. We pay for new roofs out of free cash. So if a roof is not just needing a patch job, that's kind of a maintenance issue. But if we need a new roof at a school, we're going to put in the CIP and we're going to pay for it. So I want to just reassure people, we are still committed and will continue to be committed to those capital improvements in the buildings that affect the working conditions of the folks who are there every single day. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Jason and then Ari.
Thanks. I think it's important to also, similar to, the theme that Victor said, to acknowledge some of the things, Mayor, that surprised me in the positive when we were getting into this. And, you know, we are new, but some of us have been following for a while. So I was surprised, right? I was surprised to, as was said, start off the bat with a true representation of what the economic run rate costs were for the prior year. You know, that's new and was a lift to get to 297.4 instead of whatever 292 or, you know, and that's reflective of what you said, Mayor, in my view, of being more careful with free cash. You know, the reason why there was 4 million to supplement, et cetera, was because of some of those practices you talked about. And I'm, like Jonathan mentioned, supportive of moving away from that. You know, I think the flip side of that is the number, you know, the other thing we want to get away from is talking about numbers and different bases and everything. Like, if we're going to recognize the positive move away from the free cash and the truing up the base, the increase is 5.75. And I think that's right to say that's a historic increase. I agree with Victor's comment on that. You know, and so I think the positive surprise is we see those two moves, an economically correct base and a 5.75 historic increase, and we're feeling positive, and yet we're also seeing historic inflation. You know, and I think, Jonathan, you covered that very well. I mean, we have to also think about that. And so, you know, I guess I understand the community's concerns then that result from, you know, positive moves on an absolute basis, absolutely. And yet here we are again. I think, you know, when we went out and talked to the community, people do talk about math a lot. There's a lot of energy and excitement for moving forward in that. You know, equally, I would say we as the community don't want to be having this type of tension and discussions again, and certainly want to shield from direct classroom impact. And so we are like stuck between a rock and a hard place, as it were, you know. You know, I guess I want to say to the superintendent, recognizing that rock and a hard place situation, that, you know, both sympathize, applaud the efforts to try to find a way through. I know it's not been easy, and you know, I think your comments about the impact resonate with me, and I'm torn on that, because I think we want to advocate, and we also have to make it work within some realities. You know, so from my perspective, really glad we are where we are, and yet recognize the cost, and we still don't have math, you know. And I think, gosh, in a budget as large as over $300 million, you're like, isn't $1 more million, how are we talking about this? And yet, like, I agree also with Jonathan's observation, now having, you know, I prefer spreadsheets to big budget books, but nevertheless, like, spent plenty of time in some spreadsheets recently, and there really isn't stuff flying around. You know, there's not some easy option that we forgot to think about. And so therefore, and based on the community comments we've heard, Alicia, I'm really glad you gave some insight into our energy has been focused on what are the creative solutions. You know, and yes, some of them, I like the idea you mentioned, which unfortunately does violate the, how can we think about free cash, but we're midstream on investments in elementary MTSS that we have experience that shows that may pay off over time, but we need a few more years. And here we are trying to invest in middle school MTSS, so we're not squishing the balloon in elementary only to have it reemerge in middle. So yes, maybe I'm willing to violate my free cash principles to see if we can get that done. I mean, we've been spending a lot of time with ideas like that. You know, I also agree with the chair's comment that we're at a juncture where we're not feeling that there's likely to be significant progress on that. And so, you know, I think the challenge now is, you know, we're scheduled to do certain things at certain times. From my perspective, I guess my message to our colleagues is we need a little bit of time now with the energy having been focused on creative options to think more about deciding among some tough options and continuing the dialogue, because I think somewhere in the middle, if it's crazy if you're an outsider looking at this, for us to be having these many tough trade-offs over 1 million out of a $300+ million budget, but that really is where we are right now. And so I am with my colleague Tamika sort of thinking, what are the options? And you know, if it's not reducing the interventionist support, which by the way, I think Superintendent, you've done a really good job of explaining why that's super critical, as have some of the community speakers today. We should be thinking about what else and what does the least amount of impact on direct classroom but delivers math. And we may not like that picture because there may not be those great things. And I think the community and we as a committee need to put our best foot forward on what those types of trade-offs are in the coming days or maybe a few weeks, and chart the path forward. But yeah, it's disappointing that we're at this juncture with what I think, if I were the mayor, I'd say I really tried to make this set up for not being at this juncture, and the macroeconomic realities are what they are. Thank you.
Ari. Thank you. I have a bunch of notes. I might jump around. I apologize in advance. I'll start off by saying I am the first person to say I know we are in an ecosystem. I come from a family who are teachers, school employees, other city employees. I think that is very clear. That's been made, a point that's been made. But I also say we are here to advocate for the schools, and that's what I was elected to do. I know we're in a situation that was put into us by previous administrations, previous school committees, and none of us are happy about it. But I keep on going back to it. And the problem here right now we're dealing with is the allocation. Mayor Laredo, I know you have done what you can for us on that side of things. But if we are going to invest in MTSS, we are starting to see a return happening at Ainger. If we are going to really trust in our educators, the experts that have come into this room, shown us that it's working, Dr. Nolan, you show us probably weekly updates on kind of where we're seeing those improvements happening. I am so nervous and disappointed that we're in a position that we're saying, hey, it's really working out at the elementary school, but we're saying hands off at middle school. So that's just my first comment. And I'm going to start with the carry forward as well. It feels really uncomfortable that like we have this 2.5 million for next year and we're saying we're going to get a 5% increase, but we already know some certain costs. And at this year, when we got this allocation, we were left only knowing our contractual obligations, we were left over with only $700,000. That's not a way for us to get on a path to thrive. I think a lot of us, a majority of us here, I don't want to say all because I don't want to speak for everyone, but believe in this strategic plan that has been set forward for the Thrive budget. So I just want to point that out as well. But I also want to leave us with a question. I started this whole process off very new. I'm on the younger side of the committee, so learning budgets and all this fun stuff on the go. But I said, let's put our thinking caps on. It's clear the finance team, the mayor's team have tried to do that. But I also want to just note as we kind of move forward, how do we get out of this hole? We need to start we've talked about it here and there, but this long-term financial health for MPS, for the city, because right now with what we're talking about feels like we're just going in circles, and that we're never going to break that cycle. I understand the position the city's in. I understand the position that we're in. I am feeling we are inching closer and closer to compromising if we aren't already are on some of our key values of MPS, whether it's with our diversity and inclusion programs, whether it's with our academic standards. It feels like we're getting to that line if we aren't already there. And I don't know, personally, I know we were talking about potentially taking a straw vote tonight on where we stand with things. I don't know if I'm ready for that, because it doesn't seem like we're anywhere closer than where we started. So, Victor?
On microphone. Part of what I'm worried about a little bit also is I watch our friends over in Brookline and Superintendent Bellawong's dealing with what is it, like 8%, I think, override that she's going to have to deal with this year. Arlington's going through. By the way, you're totally right. I haven't done the Newton version of it, but I have done it in Arlington before. So there are interesting elements, let's put it away, through this process that I'm definitely learning as well too. I guess I'm not usually at the ilk to want to put anybody on the spot, but I'm curious just to get your thoughts, Mary, because I think you've helped articulate, I think, a concern that I actually generally share, which is we don't want to tap into one-time funding for operating purposes. And kind of like you, Jason, I'm almost going like, at this point, do I violate my own sort of ground principles in some ways? No, and I see you're shaking your head, but I guess this is, you don't have to answer this, but I'm curious if we think pension evolutions and maybe an override might be in the future, is there any sort of Band-Aid solution? I don't want to even call it a Band-Aid, that like if we were to say, for hypothetically, let's tap into the ESF or the free cash once, we all have to agree that we're not going to tap it into it again next year, hypothetically speaking, to buy us the time to do the pension timetable, to do the override discussions, et cetera. Is that even, is there any kind of path forward in any version of the world that you could see that happening?
May I respond?
Yeah.
No.
And can you help me understand why that's the case? And sorry if I'm being repetitive. Yeah.
Look, the request for, we're not going to do any quote unquote stabilization funds for exactly the reason I described a moment ago. I don't think that's good budgeting. Okay. I don't think that's actually fair to the schools. I think that just lets the mayor kind of hand out money as if it were, if you come and you ask enough, you get it. That's a terrible way to do a budget. The way to do a budget is you do the best you can with the finite resources you have. You do that upfront. You say to the school committee, here's the money. Here's the money. Understanding that it would be great if we had more, but here's the money. And by the way, that 9% health insurance increase, City Fit has the same issue, same utilities issues, okay? So the school buildings are not alone in those kinds of increases. We need to deal with that on the city side. And yet the city side is getting a far smaller increase percentage-wise than the schools are. And I'm fine with that. I really am. I think that's acceptable. As far as an override, I've said this multiple times, and I'll say it again. I love the energy that's in this room about an override, okay? I really do. And if and when, and I say when, we go out for overrides, debt exclusion and or operating, we're going to need the energy of every single person in this room. But please remember that the vast majority of people who vote do not have kids in the public schools. They don't. You start off an override campaign with probably close to half of the people saying, I'm not voting to increase my taxes. Okay. I don't know if the number is 40% or 42%, but that's where you start. We don't pass overrides in the city by a 65 to 35% margin. We've never done that. And I've been in the city and worked on override campaigns for a long time. So we have to be realistic about it. And I'm not comfortable at all right now that the voters are going to support that. You got to have at least a couple of years under your belt of demonstrated financial acumen, demonstrated clear finances, not guess what, we've got an extra pot of money of free cash there that we can just allocate. You're clear, you're transparent, you identify improvements that you would make in the school system and on the city side. And then you ask the voters for money. But you can't just, I don't want anyone in this room thinking we're going out for an override in the next year. It's not going to happen. And if you do, run the campaign.
Yep.
But I don't think you're going to get the votes for it. And that would concern me greatly because the last thing I want to do is go out for an override and lose.
Yep.
We're going to go out for an override. We are going to win.
So I agree with you, and I think I appreciate your transparency because that's the one issue with which I just respectfully disagree. And you may have more political savvy than I do, but that's the one instance where and I did not knock on the same number of doors that you do, so I'll give you full credit for that as always. But the people with whom I've had a chance to speak, even the ones who were adamantly opposed to it, I would say it's probably somewhere in the ballpark of 80%. And once I explained, it took time to explain it, but once I explained it, they got it, they understood it. The question for me is, how do you scale that effort and do it in a way that's fast enough? And I get it. You might not think that you can be done within the year. And I hear the call to action. If someone's going to get it done, then maybe that's on me. But I know, I understand your point. And again, to me, it's more of an issue of, I get your point about the discipline and the acumen aspects of financial management. 100% with you there. I just think the situation in which we're in, not just us, but to your point, the rest of the city, the other districts that are around us are in very, I hate the word historic because people use it way too often. It is one of these more unusual times. And so I think the urgency changes, and therefore the question just to me is, if we do think that's a path, one, which we've established, what is that timetable that we think is a 1 year, 2 year, 3 years to get to something like that? And two, what is the way that we bridge to, and do you ever create exceptions? Again, I think we're sort of going in circles, so I don't want to.
I just want to remind folks, this is not the first time we've had a very large increase in health insurance. We've had that before. So that's something you factor in. There's sometimes when it's really difficult. This is one of those years. I don't think anyone would argue that a 9% increase in health insurance is not difficult to grapple with, and it's difficult on the city side. And we've had years when we've had sharp spikes in utilities. So there's always going to be some ebb and flow in that. And I appreciate that. And that makes the superintendent's job more difficult.
I guess then my final, sorry, this will be the closing comment, is, it's rhetorical. Feel free to answer it. If you were in, you sort of are in our shoes, but if you're in the shoes in a different way, what else? Where would you suggest that we get the? Again, we want to make sure that we're going through. I mean, by the way, I'm with you. By the way, Ari, I'm not ready. I've been pouring through this document as well too, but I'm not ready to go.
As I said earlier, I defer to the superintendent's judgment as to how she allocates resources. I think she's exceptionally capable. Yeah. Has tough choices to make. I think she's made them.
Okay. Thank you.
Linda?
I guess I'm going back to Jonathan's points from earlier this evening. I do believe we are in a year of an exception, and it really is feeling like we're in this hole that we can't climb out. And so I'd like to begin with a question to Superintendent Nolan. If we, in our dream, were able to fund MTSS in a manner in which you desire, how long would it take us to get the payback like we are seeing at Anger?
So I have deep, deep confidence in our teachers, but children are not widgets and they do not move on a linear fashion. I also just want to say I was a longtime middle school teacher. Middle school brains change faster only to the brains of infants in their first year of life. And I say that to you because at the beginning of the school year, a child could be on track for jump up to advanced mathematics. And by the end of the year, they could be in the despair of a place where they couldn't envision being earlier that year. And all of it's developmentally appropriate, and all of it is the full range of human experience that we are trying to capture in the pathways. That said, we do have proof of concept from our MTSS colleagues in the elementary schools, not just Anger. And the Anger staff, by the way, were doing this without a district that was steering the ship in the same direction. So there was a lot of, I'll call it horse trading. I'll trade in 2 of these people for 1 of those and these. And so the mayor is respectfully asking us, like, why can't you cut that? Or could you do this? Or because all of those behind the scenes things that happened are not the way you scale excellence for a school system. So like, hoorah, Anger, but I don't want everybody to spend 6 years trying to figure it out alone. So we are making a school system, not a system of schools. We are saying this is how we roll. So every kid, regardless of zip code or income, gets to excel. So with that in mind, I'm a little worried about putting it together with duct tape and paper clips so that I can say we did math, but I want to do it, right? However, what we have seen in the first year of full implementation last year, and by first year, I mean I've been here 3 years. The first year, we did not make moves to do things. You all know what that year was like. Nor did I have any business as a new person coming in saying, let's just do all the things this year. So year 2, we took an investment in 5 high-need schools. So we chose the most difficult schools, not the places for the easiest lifts. We saw early signs of the MTSS working in terms of reductions in requests for special ed services and testing. We also saw this year, when we reorganized schedules and pushed in the reorganized specialists in math and English literacy, that any student receiving those interventions bettered the state and national average for improvement in growth in math and English language arts. In 5 months, we did that. So do I feel like bullish on our capacity? I do. Can I tell you that that's going to be $1 million return? I can't, and I'd be a fool if I said that to you. Would I love to bet on our people? Yes, I would.
I totally get it. And I knew you were going to say that, quite honestly. I guess where my head was going is we are in this hole, and if we could fund MTSS the way we would like, you know, is it 3 years that we're in this hole? Like, what is that time frame? Otherwise, I feel like that hole is going to be 8 years, is going, you know, even longer.
Well, I mean, I would like to say to you that if I couldn't produce some results with our colleagues in 3 years, then we need to ask some real questions about the integrity of the program. But I also just want to say, I need 3 years of the actual amount of money we're supposed to spend. Like, don't ask me to stop spending it or put in, you know, the freeze, or can you reduce by 2 or take away the thing. Like, we need to measure those implementations in a stable environment. And that's, you know, why I have all the bridge imagery all over my PowerPoint presentations, because we need a stabilized infrastructure that bridges us from where we've been to where we want to go. And I don't want to overpromise. You know, what I've learned in the city is I'll take $1 million whenever I get it. So if that's when we want to, if that's what we want to do, but I just want to be, I'm worried about next year's cuts already. So I don't want to start a new program. You know, I really need to make sure that the investments we've made thus far stick.
I guess I look back then to you, Mayor Laredo. It feels to me like we're in this hole. We're in this hole for a very long time. And, you know, could we somehow acknowledge that this year is an exception per Jonathan's comments, and try to dig out through MTSS? Which
the answer is no. I don't want to, you know, it would be easy for, it'd be really easy for me to go back and say, sure, we'll consider it. We're going to have lots of conversations about it and come back with the same answer. But we have given this tremendous thought for a long period of time. We came in with the allocation with very clear understanding of what the school's needs were, what we could do, and that we were going to break this cycle of frankly playing games. I don't believe in that. And that's why we're not going to come up with some free cash allocation. That's not fair. And I appreciate this. I actually really appreciate the superintendent. It would be easy for the superintendent to sit here today and say, sure, don't worry about it. In 3 years, you're all set. And then have to come in 3 years and tell me, guess what? Didn't work. We'd both look pretty bad. And I appreciate the candor. But the candor is, I can't promise it. And my candor, and I appreciate that, my candor is, we're not going to fund initiatives like this with free cash. That's it. But we are going to increase the allocation because we're using free cash for its proper purposes rather than being too conservative.
Are you all set, Linda?
I am, thank you.
You have Ben and then Jonathan.
It's hard not to be thinking about our colleagues who had a tough day, and And Anna, that includes you. I've been in the position of the leader whose board tells him that that's what has to happen. And you always think, thank you, Jonathan. You always think there's another way and another day. And it's hard to get ourselves past that, but here we are, and this is what we have to work to fix so that we don't have that day again. I'm grateful to my colleagues for your energy today in speaking. The three of us who've been on the finance program have been on this for 2.5 months. We thought we were in a really good shape when we started talking about numbers, and when Jason and I sat on the finance working group that the mayor put together, and we recognized that we were headed toward the plan that we've been talking about for years. Budget less conservatively, deploy the free cash, deal with the pension. That's what we did. And then we hit the inflation stuff, and we realized that the other side of the equation was going to be a big problem for us. It's been deflating and challenging, but you're rallying us, off the mat. I will say that we negotiated and we've pushed. We pushed right up to the point where the mayor said this is not a negotiation, and then we continued negotiating and pushing. And we're continuing to do that tonight. And I'm grateful that you have all joined in the push. And I appreciate you all. When Victor keeps talking about the override every meeting, I'm thinking that's not what we're here to do. Let's solve our problem. But it reminded me tonight that when the last override failed, there weren't enough parents for it, because the parents didn't have confidence in the school system, because the school system hadn't had good leadership, and it wasn't delivering for the families and the kids in spite of the educators that we knew we had in the buildings. We're gonna need another one, is what all the signs are pointing toward, and we got to make sure that we are delivering for the students today, so that when we go to ask the people, the 40% are going to say no. We know that. We got to get the parents to say yes and to show up this time. So we talk about serving the kids. We talk about serving the parents. That's our laser focus. I'm grateful that we're not having a conversation about cutting classrooms yet. That's where we've been the last few years, is how many elementary schools kids can we stuff into an elementary classroom? And we've been able to avoid that thanks to the allocation and to the work of the superintendent and the sacrifices that we're making in other places. Jonathan, the MTSS is sort of the game, right? If we're gonna bend the cost curve, that's gonna be the only place where I can see it happening. Part of what that does, it rebuilds the parent trust. It rebuilds the trust in the system that the kids are getting what they need, and the results are there, and they look at the STAR math scores, and they look at the MCAS, and they say, yeah, my kid is getting what they need in the school. And that's where we have to get. The carry forward is a lot of fun to talk about. We were allocated 296.9, 7.3, something like that. It's all blurry now. We were allocated something like that, but in reality, 3.5 of that was money that was ours that we kicked over from last year. We've been allocated 314.5 this year, but 2.5 of that was money that we're now not spending and rolling over in next year. So we're getting 312 out of the city. So
that's not accurate. You're getting 314. You're using the 2.5 to buttress the budget.
Go to gross. 318.
You're buttressing the budget with that carry forward. It's not that the city's really giving you 312. The city's giving you the 314. Am I correct, Liam? And you roll over the additional 2.5 and you add that to your budget, correct?
There's a few different ways to look at it. Ultimately, when I showed you that chart that said 18.3 and that said 10.1 of expected circuit breaker using that circuit breaker funding, and then the carry forward at 2.5, what we'll ultimately need to do is instead of actually spending 10.1, I'll need to actually spend closer to $8 million because that's the money that I would need to actually carry forward into 28.
You've accounted for that.
I have not gone through the 28. This is a 27 budget. So when we go through the budget process, and so this has been, you know, from my perspective, this is a multi-year. It's been probably 6 years that we've been doing this. My perspective is to slowly, and we're doing it this year, get out of the cycle.
Sure.
But it is going to be effectively a way for us that we're going to have to do this year, like we're doing this year. We need to make sure that we end with a balance. Whatever balance that target would be, my suggestion would be to roll it down 250 to 500,000 from 2.5 to 2 million. That means that we need to end with a balance next year with $2 million.
So, Liam, did we receive the 297 from the city this year, or did we receive that minus 3.5?
Again, so we received the 297.5, and in addition, if you gross up the circuit breaker money, I think that's on top of that. But
we actually received 292 and then a bunch of free cash mumbo jumbo that makes a problem.
And then just of the 292, a component of that was received from ourselves the prior year forward.
That's
No.
Yeah.
No, it's different than that. So the city, let's talk this year. The city gives us 314.5. On top of that, we add almost 10 million in grants, IDEA, right? And we add the 2.5 million carry forward.
That's correct.
And we get to a gross of like 340. Is that right?
That's right. Plus all your fees and everything else you collect, bus fees and athletic fees, all that grosses you.
It's a source of revenue for the FY27 budget.
But it means every year
Not
you
the
don't
city's
fully
application.
spend.
Okay.
Correct.
Totally agree. And my point was we've had a similar effect if you looked back 1 year.
There should be no
In that
effective
game,
difference.
we've been in that game for a while. And what really makes a difference year to year is if we change that carry forward level, we'd like to reduce it. And then that pinches us on the budget because we have whatever
Correct.
that delta is
That's right.
less for
Yes.
operation.
Yes.
Okay. We got the book on Monday. I don't see how any of us is going to vote tonight. I don't know if we need to move to not vote or if we can just.
We don't. The agenda said possible vote, so we do not need to vote tonight.
Okay. Then we work.
Jonathan, did you have something?
I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. My comments before, I was not per se advocating for free cash, right? My thing about where I feel like we are is I feel like despite all of the work that has been done, despite the sea change in the way that we are looking at the baseline, I am unconvinced that we are as close to actually funding the things that we say we want to do in a structurally sustainable way. I am unconvinced that we are as close to what we want to have happen as we say we are. I just, and that, like, that's not about anybody at the table here. I just don't, given the dynamics of the carry forward, given the dynamics of where we are in terms of like money in, money out, I am just unconvinced that we're just not there. Like, I don't feel like the way that we've got this set up right now actually sets us up for success next year, given my understanding of how this comes together. And that is a problem. And it's got cost solutions, it's got revenue solutions. We clearly don't have the solution. And so that was I just wanted to make that clear. I wasn't trying to argue for violating the free cash rule. I don't actually know how I think about that, to be perfectly honest. But that was the thrust of what I was trying to get across, is we have not figured this out, in my opinion. And it's not because nobody's trying, it's because it's really hard and it's been broken for a while. But we're not there yet.
Thank you. Tamika?
So it just occurred to me to ask whether everyone understands what a straw vote is, what that would entail.
Let's pretend I don't.
Okay. So, for a friend. So, yeah. So, straw vote, it's not the final vote. It's kind of an indicator, which is essentially what we've been doing. We've been indicating how we might move or not move on the final decision, the final approval or not of the budget. And so the reason that procedural kind of intervening step is there is it's because it allows us to either put the final vote up for vote or hold it back, throttle it back. It's not ready because you don't want to put it up when it's unlikely to pass. And so doing the straw vote intermediary step says, all right, what is the will of the committee in a way that we can actually do that? So I just wanted to say that for everyone. I have more to say, but if you have something to follow on that, I will yield. Okay, great. So Anna, the 8 interventionists, what is the total cost for that? Well, please. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I mean, the full cost of the English language arts specialist and the math was about 1.2 million.
All right, we'll go pie in the sky, 1.2 million for the full load. If I see this as being a choice, a Sophie's choice of options. One, we ask you to make $1.2 million of additional, not so pleasant cuts and have ruin a few more, valued staff members' day. That's one path. The other path is that we hold, that we pause on some of the forward initiative. And if we do that, 2 things come to mind. We'll have to have a damn compelling reason to go out to the public or a narrative of what we're offering in exchange for the forward progress that we articulated, you and your team very excellently articulated in that meeting to 8th grade parents and in the rollouts that we've been trying to do. You're going to have an alternative to offer, an intermediary step there where you say, we can't get to it now. Here's what we're doing now. And then you're also going to have a plan for how to get there that's built into now. And I think, again, the drumbeat, Victor, the drumbeat of that override is pulling from what the mayor said. He said, we can't go out for an override and ask for something unless it's enticing to people, unless it's something that a majority of our parents and our community members can get behind and endorse. The one pushback that I will say on that is we, the school committee, can't do an override on our own. It is you, the mayor, who gets to, because of our system of government, you get to put it forward. So I suppose if I'm trying to formulate an ask and a way out of this to kind of not stall entirely on the forward momentum and the progress that all of you heard in your campaigns. I didn't do much campaigning, I'm just putting that out there. But you heard it, and you heard it repeatedly. You heard it vehemently. If you're going to say to your constituents who supported you, look, can't get it done in this moment at this time, however, will you join me? And if we hold this out as, we'll put it on the table for the voters. Hey, this is what you want. If this is what you want, this is what we need. And we have our pause in the moment. We can't get there this year without some deep, deep, deep additional cuts. Superintendent has shown she's flexed on this and shown I'm willing to do it. I don't want to, but if I have to, here's the balanced budget. And I take her at her word when she says that that was a difficult and arduous task. This is something, if we're looking for a way out, this for me reads like a viable plan B. So I'm wondering, Mayor, you don't have to respond in the moment. I know you're a deliberative man, and I'm hoping you don't give the no, which is easy in the moment to give. Think on that. Think on that. Hold on, still speaking. Think on that, because I think that would be the way for us to honor the very conservative and reasonable plan that you formulated that says, hey, NPS, I'm not going to play games. If this is your budget and your allocation, this is your budget and your allocation, and you can take me at my word that that's what you're going to have to live with.
I promise.
Hold on one second.
I thought you were done. Sorry.
Still not done. I have watched for 6 years now, and it's been a frustrating task to observe that it's so easy to blame the person who sits in the mayor's office for these funding crunches every year. It was easy to do with our prior mayor because she didn't send her children to Newton Public Schools. Pick a reason. Many of them existed. I would say you, a hometown, homegrown, I would say boy, but you're a man. You are a home, sure, absolutely. That argument doesn't hold for you. And so it's not a matter of caring for the schools or appreciating the schools or being of the schools. It's a matter of this funding problem that we run into headlong every single year. So how do we get out of it? And I heard, I'm sorry, one of the gentlemen asked, what's the plan going forward? How do we get out of it? We don't have anything besides a possible restructuring of OPEB dangling out. This would be some way for us to think about a concrete positive step out of it. That's all I'm saying. I yield to you, Mayor.
I will, as I've said on multiple occasions, and I will say once again, I am open to doing both debt exclusion and or operating overrides. We will need debt exclusion overrides if we want to do any subsequent school buildings. We'll need it for a police station. We will look very carefully at all of those needs, coupled with the needs of schools, and we'll talk to the school committee. This is not going to be done in isolation. We're going to have conversations with the school committee, the city council, residents of the city. We'll see what the appetite is. But I really would urge us to be very thoughtful and very careful before we go out to the voters, and not just because all of us see the needs of the schools, which are really fully apparent to those of us sitting at this table and the people in this room. There's a lot of other people in the community, and notwithstanding Victor's eloquence at the door when he knocked on people's doors, we have a real reality to deal with, that you have to persuade voters to vote for that. And that's not easy. It's not easy in this community. So we're always open to it. We'll talk with our colleagues in the city council and the school committee, and we'll try to work together on those things.
I think the problem is the timing. So I don't see an override going out in a year, and I don't see parents who really want this math program supporting it if it takes 2 years. I mean, this math program is a bit of a last best hope for MPS doing what we need to do in some respects for some people. And so that's my concern. Jason, you were up.
Thanks. Yeah, well, first, I think as new school committee members, we always welcome and thank our more experienced colleagues for educating us on and offline. I know, more experience. Anyway, so from a straw vote perspective, I think listening to also both of the initial two options you talked about, needing flesh on that, I think is really important before we could even elicit an early, in my opinion, an early read on where we would want to go. And so I agree that we do want to understand, if we do not move forward with the math program as intended, what we could do in the interim. I think that would be really important for an option. That was your second option. The first option, the hard path with math that finds the money. I'm hoping it's not 1.2. I mean, I think we need to go really with the puts and takes that have happened. And we talked about the calculus project today, which was part of that original 1 million. Let's figure out exactly what is needed to do that. I'm hopeful it's a little bit shy of 1, but I don't think that there's a lot of easy things to build up to even just a little shy of 1, but we should see what that best offer is, staying as far away from the direct classroom as we can. And we need to then evaluate it. I mean, I think the thing for me, I couldn't agree more with my colleague Alicia's comment that, you know, we want to make progress on that initiative because that is what gets the flywheel turning of motivation among the parents and support for future potential overrides and all of that. I mean, we can't just sit on our hands. And we've heard from the community, we've heard from many teachers how important the MTSS resources are at the middle school, whether or not we do a new math program. So it's all of the above. Like we need to understand what's that hard path. And it may be that this is not the year, but we've got to really tee it up before, and then we'll probably want to do a straw vote then. You know what I mean? So, so that's my suggestion.
I agree. I think we have a bit of a charge for the superintendent, which is what could, say we don't do math, what could we do that addresses some of the needs that we've heard from the community? And then if we want to define that million or so, and I do think it's $1 million, I want to say, like, I don't see any universe in which I would support doing a half-baked job at this. Like, we can't do that. We've done that before. It does not work for the teachers. It doesn't work for the students. So I think it's $1 million. To do it right, then we do it right. So what are the trade-offs? I don't know how to say I need math more than I need this. And once we have that, then I think I could consider a straw vote. But right now, I don't actually know what trade-offs I'm considering. Linda?
I said this, I think it was last week, but I wanted to repeat it for the folks in the room, because we have more people in the room this evening as well as online. If you think about it, we've got 11,000 students in the district. And if each family was able to contribute $100, that would fund our $1 million gap. Or if each family was able to forego the new device that their child has, the $200 that goes to a new device, let them use the old device for another year or two. Like, I just bring it up because to me, I would love to see this happen. And if anyone in this room is interested, you can see me afterwards. We can talk about it, but wanted to raise it again.
Superintendent has a QR code that we can all
I do,
use
actually.
to make donations directly to and
feel like I should shine it on the.
I think it is. Yeah, yeah.
Keep your calls coming in.
Yeah. Ari.
I just want us to caution, Linda, I know your enthusiasm behind it, but as we talk about those 11,000 students and those families, we come from such a diverse socioeconomic background in Newton. And I know we have this perception of being a wealthy city, but that is not necessarily true for all 11,000 families or 11,000 students. So I just want us to caution that as we talk like that.
Jonathan?
I am also super supportive of figuring out how we as a school committee help the Newton Schools Foundation and the folks we spoke with earlier turbocharge their fundraising, and for the families who feel like they've got the ability to lean into that and want to lean into that, how do we make sure that we do that in a way that they feel like can be relevant to them as well? For what it's worth, though, that solve here is little different from a one-time cash infusion from the free cash pool that may or may not exist. It does not, it still doesn't actually get us under the problem that we have, as exciting as it would be to see the city rally around that in that way. I'd love to have them, we find 100 million other uses for it, but it's tricky. It feels tricky to bank on that for doing what is so fundamentally core to driving the schools. I feel like I'm a wet blanket, but.
Ben?
Dr. Nolan, one thing that you talked about was the intern program, $300,000 or so. Do the universities contribute to that program?
So it depends which arm of that program you're discussing. We receive work study funds from Boston College, and in turn, we do, it's an in-kind kind of scenario. It's cheaper than any substitute rate that we have and helps us with our situation. That's one arm. Other arms are, we actually reduce the number of paraprofessionals we use in the district because we are training these teachers who are in the Boston College pipeline. We have a fantastic relationship with Boston College, and we met earlier this year to try to expand that reach. But you know, it's hard to be in graduate school and not have any sort of stipend. So we were ahead of the pack with this. You know, most districts don't have that kind of internship scenario. So it's just, I couldn't cut more people. So
So there's a lot of value to the schools in this. Have we, in your opinion, exhausted the opportunity to get them writing checks to fund these programs?
I don't think there's a world that Boston College is going to fund our math program, if that's what you mean.
No, but they may be able to help you get your interns back.
Perhaps. Yeah. I mean, one of the asks that was in my initial conception of the budget is we need a grants and development person. I mean, I do feel that we're leaving untapped resources. I mean, Linda and I have talked about this a little bit. And last summer, before you were all elected, I had a meeting with many community members and former board members here. There was a lot of action and energy last year during the budget process, and people were like, well, I want additional teachers in the 5th grade, like, can I write you a check kind of things? And we can't, of course, do that. But if we had an endowment that would allow us to backstop some of the costs, if we're not allowed to have our own internal carry forward to use for our purposes, you know, I just want to say that, you know, other schools foundations really do those types of multi-million-dollar several year scenarios. I also want to tell the public that, you know, we've called in our venture capital chips and have had donations of like 1 million over two years. Let's say Renaissance Learning helping us in that way, but that's not forever, right? So, I mean, we certainly can. If I had more time to devote to that, I could certainly work on it, but I have to do all this stuff with all y'all.
We are a handful. Is there, you know, the grant writing, it's like a role that the goal is that pays for itself.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is there a world where we can, I don't know if it's this year or some other year, bump up the grant forecast and say, yeah, we're going to put another X 100,000 or million on the revenue side, and then we're going to put this money on the cost side for the writer?
Well, our business and finance person who does that also does food service, purchasing and process. I mean, so we are a pretty lean central office, and we're going to be a few pounds lighter if this.
Sorry, I wasn't clear. I'm saying we add a grant writer, we add a position, and the offset for that position, the way we pay for it is by putting more grant revenue onto the other side of the.
I mean, districts do that.
Mm-hmm. The question becomes the confidence in our ability to actualize the grants. I don't know what's out there. I don't know what the universe looks like.
Well, and I'm sorry, there's just been a lot of poking at the body count at Ed Center and, you know, looking at, you know, are we the same as we were in 2002? And this will add to that perception. So I mean, it would be nice. That would be nice. We certainly, our current grant writer does her salary 4 times over probably.
Do you think there's more grant money out there that we could access if we invested more in grant writing?
I'm sure there is.
Took me 4 tries, but that was the question I was trying to get to. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. But if you're giving me the same quid pro quo, like, can the person reliably get their salary every year? I don't know the answer to that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mika?
I'm exhausted, and I know you guys are tired too. So I'm going to be quick. At one point in time, you had, I don't know when, you had floated the idea of naming rights for things like, you know, fields and such like that. I mean, I was a skeptic and probably still am, but when I'm thinking about how do we get more revenue into the schools, replenishing revenue into the schools, it's time to start having those conversations for real. Yeah. And so, yeah, with a depleted,
the policy subcommittee has taken up the
great.
Look at Victory, can't wait. Like,
Great,
let's
go.
Let's name this room.
And then, you know, real quick tack on to what Ben was saying. I get it. However, I think that would get us into some of the, you know, overages perception, like the superintendent was talking about. If we were to add a position to do grants, we're asking our teachers every day, sadly, to do more with less. So at the Ed Center and in our administrative spaces, we are now having to just model that. We're going to have to mirror that. The admin team here is going to have to do more with less. That's a stark reality that's starting to set in. So bump up the grant writing revenue that we already have without adding an additional person that would then have to be, salary paid for, benefits paid for. It balloons and it escalates. And I think we have to be very careful about keeping those levels and those balances in place. That's all.
So respectfully, I see that a little differently. I think if Dr. Nolan had said, yeah, I know there's $500,000 of grant revenue out there that we're just not able to get to because we don't have the resources, I would say, okay, well then let's hire a person for whatever that person costs. It's not going to be 500,000, and let's go get that, and that's net positive. Sometimes in the private sector, you do a huge layoff, and then you hire salespeople at the same time because they're going to pay for themselves and the revenue they bring in the door. What Dr. Nolan just said is she doesn't know that much money is out there to make it effective, and so that means we're not going to do that right now.
And I'll just tell you why. A lot of the grants that are available to us are for districts with a much higher poverty level than we are eligible for. We are just a unique place. We are urban and suburban. We have such huge diversity of socioeconomics, and we are not funded at the state level the way other districts are because of the wealth of the overall city. So there are some limitations. Like there are many times where Amy, our grant writer, and I send her something. She's like, sorry, boss, same deal, not poor enough. So that doesn't mitigate the poverty needs of the system, but it means, for example, we can't get the high quality literacy tutoring grant because we don't meet all the criteria.
And that's totally fair. And we have to be realistic about that. What we don't want to do is invest in a grant writer who then doesn't bring in their paycheck. And now we've gone backwards on the whole thing. So
right.
That's fine.
Perhaps the middle road to getting there is to test the waters, if you will, but not hiring someone to do it, but essentially, contracting and seeing what that gets. A little bit less of a commitment.
So yeah, and Dr. Nolan, we've actually talked about that specifically. Maybe the question here is, if there is a specific situation where there are high probability grants that you are not able to staff the writing of, let's have a conversation and figure out if there's some way to find the money to contract a grant writer and try to go get it.
Can I just weigh in on the grant stuff, folks? Grants sound wonderful, okay, but they tend to be one time, either for a year, 2 years, 3 years, for a specific thing that we may or may not want educationally. And the challenge, of course, then is, are you stuck? Have you instituted a program with, say, a $50,000 grant for 2 years, and then year 3, what do? So I respectfully, it is not a panacea. It's nice to get grant money. I'm never going to say no, but every grant the superintendent, I'm sure, asks, what is it going to be like when this grant ends? And does this grant really match what we need? And of course, the basic question is, do we even qualify for applying? So I'm not saying we don't explore it, but I would not go into it thinking that it's going to be some huge source of money for us.
Yeah, I would say to you that I know, simply because I've had some deep experience in this sector, that like my former police chief and I were able to obtain large grants for safety and security upgrades. But in the list of our priorities, like I know there's a deep pool there that we can write together, but that's not even what we're talking about for our, so it's stuff like that there's really, when I wrote the grant for the Wayfinder pilot this year, they said, it's X amount this year, but if you're going to get any more from us, you then have to add it to your base, and then we'll keep giving you money, but you have to also give in kind. And so we're not in a position where I can say, sure, I'll give 30 grand to that so for you to match it. So that's where we're at.
Yep, that all tracks. I think I would say, Mr. Mayor, we're past panaceas. We're looking for art of the possible, man. Yeah. Or Jason's go-tos, right? It's what can we do, not what can't we do. So, Dr. Nolan, bring us the opportunities. If there's something we can do, we want to figure out how we can do it.
Okay, so it looks like my homework is, what can we do to fund math within trade-offs? What can we do in a background to tee up math or address needs or do something if we don't implement math as currently constructed? Talk to me about naming rights, grants, and a dreamed of endowment of the future. Tyler.
There are just a couple things that have been said that I want to weigh in on quickly. The first is this rhetoric, especially from you, Mr. Lordo, of we're not playing games about all of this, and I just have to disagree with that. I don't think that you can look at what we've done for the past 2.5 hours or whatever is now and say it's anything other than playing games. I mean, it's like I go back to North and people ask me how the meeting was, and I'll walk them through what happened, and they'll ask me, oh, you're like agonizing over this small amount of money and finding these pennies here and wherever, and to an extent, like, they're right. There are only so many ways that you can cut $1 million. And yes, I'm not the smartest person in the world. Yes, I'm a student. Also, at the same time, I think that we should be able to acknowledge that we can't just say, oh yeah, you know, we've been forced in this position, so I guess let's think of some creative solution to do the best with what we've been given. And yes, I know this is a bigger picture thing than what is going to be the exact vote that we do tomorrow or the next day. I just think it's really important that we recognize that we can all feel frustrated about this, about the position that we've been put in inside of the system, while also having to acknowledge that we can still be disillusioned with the system at the same time. And that is something that I think we are seeing more and more of people who are acknowledging that, yes, this is a bad position. Also, you yourself said earlier this evening that you have somehow both understood the needs of the schools and understood how important the schools are, and also have put into the schools into a position that you yourself said you wouldn't be able to figure out, and that you're glad you're not the person that has to figure it out. And I think that is very telling about the position that the school has been put into. And so I think that I do, you know, I'm, you can ask most of my classmates, I'm not always an assertive person. I do think that it has been so overwhelming with the feedback that I have gotten in every time I try to talk to people about the schools, is that people are very frustrated, and frankly, I myself am frustrated, and I am saying this, I don't know what the answer is. I'm not a professional politician. I don't know every line item and every expense. I also think that it's not always the public's job to, like, the public is telling you what they need, and we can't say just, oh, we understand how important schools are, because I don't think we do. I don't think I understand it. I don't think any person understands the importance of every service. No one person is going to know the nuance of every single issue we have to solve. And I don't think we can just shut down and say, this is the way it is, work with it. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that is what any of us should be striving for ever, is to say, there's no negotiation here. This isn't open. I talked about checks and balances earlier, and it's I don't know what the point of any of this is if it's not going to be a collaborative process. And yes, that might sound naive. I also feel like I have to say that because it's not fair to a lot of people.
Right. Thank you, everyone. I think we're adjourned for tonight. See you Monday.
Re